जादू मंतर, जादू मंतर, जादू मंतर। You are going into the future.
You talking to me?
They always be these clothing.
என் பேர் மாணிக்கம். எனக்கு இன்னொரு பேர் இருக்கு.
Talking to me?
Queen is dead.
Hello. Welcome to today's podcast. We can consider this episode number 2, 3, whatever. I don't necessarily know the order of it, but order is like the big thing we're also going to be talking about in some way. But no, what we are joined by Amartya again. I like to say that I am joined by Amartya when we discussed Japanese cinema because I think I'm very much getting inducted into it in some ways. But we have Amartya with us, and we have planned this episode. I don't know why we planned this episode, but we have planned it because we want to discuss a
Because
great
I think
filmmaker.
I think we both like extremely cynical dour movies, and
I
who better to
suppose.
select one than Masaki Kobayashi.
Yes, we are going to be talking about Masaki Kobayashi, the Japanese filmmaker, who I think is almost dwarfed by the personalities of Akira Kurosawa, Yasujiro Ozu, and Kenji Mizoguchi in the
Mizoguchi, yeah.
50s at least. There's one film of his which I think has very much put him, or actually two, if you want to count the sort of Human Condition trilogy, is his breakthrough in some ways.
Yes.
But I think Harakiri has become the sort of go-to name, but I think it's the film which is more popular as opposed to the director's name. I think it's one of those films where I feel I have to still go and search for Masaki Kobayashi as opposed to, automatically getting to his name, if that makes sense. But we'll because he we'll begin by providing a brief intro and like intro into his ideology, what all of his films are sort of defined by in many senses. Then we'll be getting into samurai mythology or history in some ways, very briefly, just to set the tables, because we'll be discussing a lot of Kobayashi's work in the Jidaigeki genre, which is the period set films,
Period
correct?
settings.
Yes,
Japanese
so
period setting movies. Yes.
so we'll be discussing his 60s cinema as opposed to his 50s cinema, and how he sort of comments upon a number of themes about sort of authority, which is a central thing I think for him,
Hmm.
in all of these films in different sort of ways. So we'll be doing that, and then we'll be individually talking about, as I think whoever is familiar with how these podcasts work, we are going to be first talking about Harakiri, then some Samurai Rebellion, and then Kwaidan,
Hmm.
which is essentially 4 short stories. So, we have a lot
Hmm.
of stuff to discuss today. So we will be doing less of the usual shithousery, I think.
Hmm.
And we'll
Though
be
don't मतलब क्या ही बोले, don't cut it out.
yes.
Don't cut it out completely because we are
Yeah.
very much fond of shithousery.
I mean, we'll bring it in some ways, of course. But yes, brief intro to Kobayashi. He was born in Hokkaido, and I'm taking this from Joan Mellon's piece on Criterion, briefly
Hmm.
from hers, briefly from other sources, but a lot from hers. So he was born in Hokkaido on February 14th, 1916, and educated at the prestigious Waseda University in Tokyo. He joined Shochiku Ofuna Studio in 1941 as an assistant director. Shochiku is was at least one of the main production houses in Japan at that time.
Hmm.
And then the big thing, I think, what happened to him after that was 8 months later, he was drafted into the Japanese Imperial Army. That sort of is the big thing about Kobayashi, because I think it defines a lot of his filmmaking ideology, and the films he chooses to make are a lot to do with his experience in the
Hmm.
army and how he
Yes, of course.
opposes them in many ways. But he did this, of course, most directly, as he said actually in the interview, in the Human Condition trilogy, which goes from 1959 to 61. He talked about authoritarian power in the form of militaristic power. that Japanese military essentially, and then how basically it doesn't, basically it stars someone who's a stand-in for him, who goes in as a pacifist and sort of is turned into almost an army guy in some ways, and crushed essentially by the system over the course of three films. And it's a grueling trilogy. It's a really, really painful observation of what happens in the Japanese military and how much he actually opposes it. And you can see it very overtly there because, of course, it was just coming off the heels of World War II. And, no one was sort of making that explicit and anti-authoritarian work at that point in time. So it remains revolutionary. It was revolutionary at that time. But I think after that, what he did, and I think for the better in many ways, is that he unlocked the keys to the past essentially and sort of dug into the history of Japan, and history of sort of feudalistic power, samurais, and all the sort of, history and mythology of it, to kind of keep on going back to the fact that, there's nothing unusual about what happened in World War II.
Hmm.
I think it was very much part and parcel of an ideology that's been consistently honed throughout Japanese history. And I think he does that a lot in all three of his films in some ways. In two of them most explicitly and most force, like almost most powerfully, I think. But
Hmm.
before we sort of jump into his films, I think it's important that we discuss stuff about Jidaigeki films a little bit, but I feel more just samurais and samurai films, which are set in this particular period in Japanese history, which we call the Tokugawa
The
shogunate period
Tokugawa period or the Edo
or
period,
Edo
yes.
period, which is basically ranging from this mid 17th century to the mid 19th century, or mid or early
Yeah,
19th century. So
it's around
1600s.
1609 to around 1868 or something, around
Sure.
this time. I might be off by 2 or 3 years, but
No, no,
that's
that's fine. But
basically it.
no, yeah,
Hmm.
but you can fill us in on, because I know that you are more aware, or you've seen also many more Jidaigeki films. I'm basically the person who's seen the, top
Hmm.
listed whatever stuff that is to watch.
Hmm.
So, but I know you have seen more. But you can tell us more about um just what these films are about. What is samurai culture in these films? What is sort of, the
No,
hierarchy,
like
also power hierarchy,
no,
if that
yeah,
makes
I
sense. Yeah.
think what's necessary to understand is Jidaigeki basically are those period movies, period
Hmm.
dramas. It literally means period dramas.
Yeah.
So Jidaigeki movies are supposed to show the lives of samurais, farmers,
Yeah.
craftsmen, and merchants of that period. All of
Sure.
these stories take place before 1868. That is the end of the Edo
Yes.
period and the beginning of the Meiji Restoration, in which the shogunate is ultimately disbanded.
Sure. And
Political,
that's
it
back to
restored.
the emperor, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it restored the power back to the practical imperial rule
Sure.
under the name of the emperor, that is Meiji. Emperor Meiji
Sure.
takes over the country overall.
Sure.
You know,
Got it. Hmm.
most of this Jidaigeki takes place in Edo, which is the
Hmm.
military capital. Most of these movies usually
Hmm.
shows wandering adventurers, okay, wandering from
Hmm.
place to place, which is why the overall plot line or overall framework of all the Jidaigeki movies serve very well as television shows. If you
Sure.
check like if you check like you know I know you would be surprised to hear this. There are two Yojimbo television shows. Okay,
Hmm. Okay.
both star Toshiro Mifune, by the way.
Okay.
Uh, there's a Zatoichi TV series show which
Hmm.
also stars Shintaro Katsu, by the way, who played Zatoichi in over 24 movies.
Sure.
So
Hmm.
yeah, the problem with those TV shows is each season comprises at least 30 episodes or 60
Wow.
episodes. So I am
Okay.
like, thank you very much. Don't
Yeah.
have that much time in my
Yeah.
life, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so all these TV shows all exemplify this style of travel,
So they are. So I'm just asking because just to clarify, and I think this is because it's recurring in a lot of the film we are going to be discussing. So all of these take place in a period of sort of when peace is established rather than sort
Exactly,
of
when peace is
okay.
established. I wanted to get into that because that is also important from a political standpoint, because I think because this is Kobayashi, the politics is also becoming very, very important.
Yeah.
I think, and also because Jidaigeki itself is very much incidental and extremely dependent on the social status of all its principal characters.
Yeah.
Okay, so like there's the story of the head of the samurai class or the ronin who travel. Then there is the ichi or the masur, which who are basically the commoners working for the
Sure.
police. Okay, these are the two types of peoples who are basically going to work in the Jidaigeki format. Then there are the craftsmen, then there are the merchants, and then there are the governments. So by getting into the governments, we will get into the overall timeline of when this movie is taking place, and this is
Yep.
where the movies become especially important. uh so the timeline which we are dealing with is the period of the Tokugawa shogunate, also
Yes.
known as the Edo shogunate, which was established in 1603 to 1868. For a good reference point for people, a very good reference point for people currently right now is the FX TV show called Shogun, which is playing in FX, in America, Hulu,
Yeah.
and for Indians, it's playing on Disney Plus Hotstar.
Okay.
So it
And
is
you
streaming,
watched
and
7 episodes of it. It's amazing. Apparently, I need to get to
it
it.
has 6 episodes are out.
Okay.
It is based on out of 10 episodes, 6 episodes are out. uh It is based on a 1975 novel by James Clavell,
Okay.
same title, Shogun. It
Hmm.
is a fictionalized retelling,
Hmm.
but fictionalized retelling of a very real life event, that is the
Okay.
formation of the Tokugawa shogunate.
Okay. Okay.
But
Interesting.
yeah, but before we get to the Tokugawa shogunate, what we also need to know is what happens before the Tokugawa shogunate.
Yep.
The period before the Tokugawa shogunate is called the Sengoku period.
Okay.
But the Sengoku period it's a period where civil wars and a lot of social upheavals took place almost continuously for a period of over 10 to 20 years.
Sure.
More than that. It's
Can
like,
I make I don't know if it's a facetious comment, but Ghost of Tsushima takes place in this period or does it play before that?
if I remember correctly, Ghost of Tsushima takes place, I think, just before this.
Just
Just
before. Okay, fine.
just before, if I'm not.
Okay.
I
Okay.
might be completely wrong. I haven't played
There are
the game.
Mongols coming in the period you're talking about, right? Invasions are happening, or is this after that?
No. This is after.
So I think yeah. So it's
What you
So
are
Ghost of
talking about is like the formation of Japan and the
sure,
beginning of the imperial
sure.
body of Japan, basically.
Got it. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
not to confuse anyone else, we are in the. I was just clarifying because I've played Ghost of Tsushima and I really like the game.
So
but yeah.
during the Sengoku period, there was an emperor of Japan who was officially the ruler of the state, and every lord had sworn loyalty to him.
Sure.
But in reality, he is mostly a figurehead, a religious or ceremonial figure with the
Okay.
power that would be designated to shoguns.
Sure.
Okay, the central shogunate, because the shogun had an overall family, and the shogun was shogun had powers resembling a military dictator. Okay,
Yes. Yeah.
so from the period of, say, around 1346 to the 1360 or whatever, the overall power was given to the Ashikaga shogunate. Okay,
Yes.
and the problem which happened is there was a war in the Kanto region called the Kyotoku incident. Okay,
Sure.
which this happened because basically a cousin of one of the major officers of the shogunate killed the assistant of the shogun because
Okay.
they were drunk or something, and that's what happened.
Okay.
One guy killed the other. The war started. Okay, while the unrest is going on, during that time, the eighth shogun, he tried to strengthen the power, but his close associates did not want that power to be strengthened because,
Okay.
as you can understand, political upheaval starting.
Sure.
This is why all the wars started growing more and more and more. conf- local conflicts begin to brew up, and then in 1467 those conflicts suddenly lead into a war called the Onin War.
Okay.
Onin War goes on for a decade, 1467 to 1477.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
The war ends when, after, like, the war had finally reached Kyoto. Okay, the city of Kyoto. It destroyed 2/3 of the city. Shrines, temples, complete authority of the Ashikaga shoguns, all of it was completely gone. Okay.
Sure.
This war caused widespread disarray. Okay, along with military confrontations between different states. There was domestic fallout due to this
Sure.
war, because obviously, because of war, economy had gone to a toss.
Yeah.
Okay. So consequently, some of these feudal lords, because all the shoguns are basically feudal lords, some of these
Yes.
feudal lords found that their designated retainers, they appointed somebody else in their absence, or because
Yeah.
they had gone to war, the retainers had taken power themselves.
They
So
rose to power. So
they
yes.
rose to
Yeah.
power. So
Okay.
basically, this began another civil war overall. Okay.
Amazing. So I mean, this is basically like a
Yeah, yeah.
सबकी लेके रखेंगे sort
सबकी
of
लेके
situation.
रखेंगे basically.
Okay. Right.
Full on. It's like,
There's actually, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's a scene in Sancho the Belief, the Kenji Mizoguchi film, where
yeah.
one sort of faction is toppled over, and then you see the people who have toppled the faction over essentially destroying the place they have inhabited itself. So it feels very much like, like it's a cycle that sort of keeps on continuing in a way where, people don't know how to actually control it and then sort of destroy other people in the process.
Historians I think believe that all of these are as a result of succession disputes. They believe that this might not have led to war, and because of this war there was socio-economic unrest, there was poor treatment of aristocrats towards the peasants. This led to this led to rebellions or uprisings. Those uprisings would be called ikki. Okay. Uprisings against the ruling class would be known as ikki. Local ikkis would be staged. Okay.
But who would stage them?
They would be staged by the peasants.
Okay.
Against the ruling class.
Sure.
Okay. And because of that, like, one of the rebellion was called the Kaga rebellion, in which the local ikki was so successful they took complete control over Kaga.
Okay.
Yeah. It was like, this was bad. And also another important thing that happened was, and this is where the Shogun comes in. During this time, the Portuguese had, how do I put this? The Portuguese had discovered Japan in 1543. Okay. The Portuguese had brought in the matchlock gun.
Okay.
The matchlock gun. The matchlock gun, from that, they began to make another gun called the Tanegashima.
Okay.
The Tanegashima, due to the formation of the Tanegashima in wide numbers, foot soldiers began to be trained, armed with guns. These foot soldiers became essential in the victory. One example for people, I hope you guys are not bored.
Hopefully they're not. Yes, I was
Yeah.
about to say they don't know they are not. Like I know how people are going to react to this, but I'm interested. That's why I'm saying yes. Go ahead.
One example for people, one movie example for people in which they can point a reference to is The Hidden Fortress by Akira Kurosawa, in which you will see these foot soldiers armed with their guns attacking the swordsman. Okay.
Yeah.
But finally, you realize that there were three people. There was a war. The final war which happens is called the Shekigahara War. Okay.
Shekigahara. Okay.
The Battle of Shekigahara, which was a decisive battle on October 21st, 1600.
Okay.
It is termed as the end of the Sengoku period. Okay.
Okay. Fine.
This war would be fought by the forces of the Tokugawa Ieyasu. Okay. He's the main guy.
Yeah.
He's the main guy.
Got
Okay.
it.
He's the main guy. Tokugawa Ieyasu against a coalition of loyalist clans at the Ishida Mitsunari. Okay.
Okay.
For reference as to why that happens, the entire point of why this civil war actually happens, the formation of five clans who would rule the shogunate, and then internal civil war as to who will rule over the shogunate and all that stuff. Okay. this is what will start to happen. And for that, you guys can watch what is called the Shogun show,
We might
which
actually
is actually
discuss it
good.
sometime. So
We might
yeah.
actually discuss it, which
Mm.
is quite good.
Mhm.
Okay, so because the battle used to be considered only an internal conflict. Okay.
Mm.
However, in 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu was named the shogun, okay, by the
Okay.
emperor, a
Mhm.
position that had been left vacant since the fall of the shogunate around 27 years earlier, during the time in which I was talking about the Sengoku period.
Sure.
Okay.
Mm.
So this is what, and when by the formation of the Tokugawa shogunate,
Mm.
peace finally begins, in earnest
Sure. Yeah, I
during
mean,
that
whatever I had, little I had read and I have noted is that
time.
this is the first time when the samurai took on the responsibility of governing through civil means rather than through military force.
Yes.
And Ieyasu issued the court ordinances for the military houses by which samurai were told to train equally in arms and quote polite learning.
Hmm.
uh, According to the principle of Confucianism, which is another interesting thing, I think, which we will get to when
Yes.
we talk about Kwaidan, because there's an element of not Confucianism but Buddhism, which
Hmm.
dominated this period
Okay.
at that
As
time.
for
Yeah.
Dhruv's question as to
Hmm.
whether about the Mongol invasions and
Hmm.
our what's
Ghost
the
of
name of the
Tsushima.
game? What's the name of the game?
Ghost of
Ghost of
Tsushima.
Tsushima.
Huh.
It takes place during the Kamakura period, which is
This is
just
even
before the
before.
Sengoku
Hmm.
period. Yeah,
Okay.
1185 to 1333.
Sure.
The
Okay. Okay.
Kamakura shogunate, during
Yeah.
which the Mongol invades.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. No, but
Yeah.
I think whatever you've given in terms of the context is very valuable, because I think, and when we do eventually get to the fact that it is a peaceful time, right? What
Hmm.
does I think the interesting thing about the films we are going to be discussing is less the fact that we are caught up in the middle of a brutal war, but the wars that sort of take place even when peace is the dominant mode. And I think that's what in many ways Kobayashi's films are doing. Like, it's because the mentality is what counts, I think. And it's just that when there's peacetime, I think in all of his movies there's this sense that there's never peace for
Hmm.
the samurai in many ways, right? I think it's this idea that it's fine that the ordinances and all take on the role of being like a basically bureaucratic nonsensical maze, almost like it almost feels like you've
Hmm.
created another form of obstacle for the people to actually communicate with you rather than liberate them from the obstacle. So it's like almost getting more into entrenched forms of power than sort of
Hmm.
going away from it, even though they
Like
feel
as
like they are not. Yeah.
if one wants even more context here, like
Hmm.
samurais after during the Tokugawa shogunate, the period
Hmm.
when Tokugawa shogunate is formed, the samurais, quote
Hmm.
unquote, increasingly became courtiers. They became
Yes.
bureaucrats. They became
Hmm.
administrators rather
Yes.
than ultimately falling in war.
Hmm.
So basically, there was no war. Like, this is important. There had been no warfare
Yeah.
since the early 17th century.
Yeah.
Like, so the samurai basically through an entire generation lost all their military function during the
Yes.
Tokugawa era,
Yeah. Yeah.
also called the Edo period. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah. And just because we are going to probably reference this again and again, we should mention Bushido, the
the code
samurai
of
code,
Bushido.
the
Yeah.
code of Bushido. Yes. So I think this is, I think more or less, you correct me if I'm wrong, and you can of course add stuff to it. But I think more or less it comes down to what characteristics. Is it just a general code of honor, valor, of
Hmm.
believing in the sword? Sword has has different connotations, of course, which we will also delve into, I suppose, in the
Yeah.
films we discuss. Um but
It's
yeah, I think.
it's yeah, like there are multiple tests, because obviously at this point it's like how many l- like a terminology gets weight during a
Hmm,
period when it is given form, when it is
yeah,
conceptualized.
yeah.
As time progresses, as generations move on,
Mhm.
all these codes become additive. You know,
Yes. Hmm.
from the conception to its progression, the evolution produces a very different form of beast.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
Okay.
I think one of the things that was written is that the sword gradually did go out of fashion, at least in this period. Like it began to. There
Hmm.
are the films we are talking about probably don't address that actually because they are very much high on the sword, sort of swordsman valor in many
Hmm.
senses. Uh, but uh, but yeah, I think that's sort of one of the changes, I suppose, that you can call to a sort of code of honor, at least at one point in time. But otherwise, what are the characteristics? A lot of simplicity, purity. Um, what else is it?
Like if we go towards the Sengoku period of Bushido, the tenets
Yeah,
were usually, honor,
yeah,
warfare, weapon
yeah,
mastery, martial
yeah,
arts, valor in battle, and some
yeah.
early moral codes.
Sure. Okay.
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 When then the Edo period comes forward, in
Hmm.
the early to late Edo, in during that period, like it's 1600 early to late Edo, this is the period in which Harakiri, Samurai Rebellion all takes place. Okay,
Yeah.
all right. You
Hmm.
know, all of the politics were used to be carried out in an orderly fashion. Peace would
Hmm.
be maintained, like vehemently peace would be
Hmm.
maintained. Okay.
Yeah.
The samurai could no longer obtain merit on the battlefield. That is
Hmm.
why even the government was confused as to how to utilize the samurai's existence in
Hmm.
areas other than battle. Okay,
Yeah.
so they would follow the laws of Confucianism, in which it was valued to work for morals for the public, not for
Hmm.
personal reasons.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so for them, in there is a book called the Hagakure. In
Hmm.
Hagakure, it is
Hmm.
told that Bushido is realized in the presence of death. In the
Hmm.
case of having to choose between life and death, you should choose death.
Okay.
There
I mean,
is no
that's
other
a
reasoning. There is no
that
other reasoning. Move on with determination.
that's
This,
a
if that sounds radical, it is.
yeah. No, I
It
would
is
say
very
that's a
radical.
great
Hmm.
way of actually moving on. If you think we've got enough sort of
And I
context
think we have got
into
enough, because
enough
we
context.
are getting into the main
Yeah, yeah, and
tenets
I
of
think
the
because what
yeah.
what you said about honor in death in many ways, and choosing death between life
Hmm.
and death, I
You
think
should
is
choose death. There is no.
yeah,
What struck me is the second line. There is no other reasoning. I am like, wow,
yeah.
you are
I
not
mean,
giving us any wiggle room. Okay then.
which is a big thing in Harakiri, released in 1962. And I don't know if I should promote it as this, just I guess I should, because if some people haven't seen it, they might actually want to see it. It is the number one ranked film on Letterboxd, for whatever that is worth.
Damn.
Yeah, it's got a.
People in
Re-
Letterbox really like extremely, low
why are you?
brown beaten movies.
I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, pessimism, and I think it's also to do with when we are
Mm.
watching this film, what political, ideologies and what political ideologies are prevalent on Letterboxd, of course, but also, what are the sort of films which we gravitate towards when, at least at this point in time. And this is not a slight to Harakiri's filmmaking because we'll discuss it and how incredible it is. But I think also a lot of people who judge films on ideology, it very much fits that criteria to a T. Like, I think you can't get a film which is as critical of authority as well, you can get. It's by Masaki Kobayashi only, the Human Condition trilogy. But in this, it takes on a different form. But anyways, for whoever's not familiar with it, uh, it's also first I'll mention the crew, because this is the sort of crew which will crew. My God, flashbacks to something else.
Trauma,
Uh,
trauma.
no, right. So the writer for this is Shinobu Hashimoto, who's also written Samurai Rebellion.
Shinobu Hashimoto might be the most successful and influential screenwriter ever in
He's written
history.
Kurosawa's work also,
He
right?
has written maximum of Kurosawa work, and the works which you like. All
Okay,
of the
wow.
maximum of those are written by him.
Yeah. I mean, the Harakiri is adapted by Yasuhiko Takiguchi's Ibun Ronen Ki,
Hmm.
this is again will when we
We
talk
are
about
going to
Samurai
butcher.
Rebellion,
We are
this
going to butcher all
or
these
a lot
terms.
of
We are very
names, a
sorry.
lot of names. Sorry,
Yeah.
whoever Japanese is listening to
Whoever
us, which
Japanese, first of all,
I,
thank you for listening. I know we are
yes.
going to butcher it. Yeah.
Yes, it's shot by Yoshio Miyajima, who will also a returning name for the next for Kwaidan at least. Music is by Toru Takemitsu, who's done all three of the film's music.
Hmm.
And editing is also, I think, same editor for all three of these films we are going to talk about, Hisashi Sagara.
Hmm.
All these films also star Tatsuya Nakadai or
Hmm.
Nakadai. How do you pronounce it?
Tatsuya Nakadai.
Nakadai. Okay.
Tatsuya Nakadai. Yeah.
Okay, and he's sort of the main, person in Harakiri, but then the other two sort of main central figures are played by Rentaro
I am
Mikuni
going to
and
like
Hmm,
I'm going to hate this like Dhruv is going to hate this that I'm going to bring this comparison up but कोई
okay,
फायदा नहीं है I'm going to bring this comparison
bring
up.
it.
It's like in Samurai Rebellion you will see in Samurai Rebellion another movie which we will discuss
Hmm.
you will see that Toshiro Mifune and
Yes,
Tatsuya Nakadai
yes,
both of them are in the movie.
yeah,
I can only imagine during that era in Japan when they go
yeah.
to the theaters they are like oh my god both of them are in the same movie. It's almost like
Oh
a
my
Shah Rukh Khan
God,
and a
no,
Salman
no,
Khan
no,
movie
no, no idea
at
where
that
this is
point.
going at that point. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
in this case, both are talented, no?
yeah. In this case Nakadai और सलमान खान में बहुत फर्क है. Nakadai can actually
Yes.
act. Yes,
Nakada is incredible. Actually, the weird thing
he's
is,
incredible. I'm going to wager like I think he might be at par if
hmm,
not sometimes better than Mifune in some
hmm.
movies.
I mean,
He's
I
incredible.
actually think he's maybe it's part of the character also. But the one film I did have a difficulty getting into Nakadai's performance is in Human Condition Part One, which I know
Hmm.
you've not seen Abhi tak,
I
but
haven't
like
seen that. Yeah.
but after that, I mean, I think Harakiri is his best performance, and I think he's just
Hmm.
incredible in it. Like
He's
from
in,
whatever I've seen.
he's also incredible in Sword of Doom, which is
Yes, you've
one
mentioned
dark
this.
movie, man.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and
And of course Run,
yes, yes, yes.
Kurosawa's Run. Yeah.
Yes. So I think again, this is the sort of broad, so whatever people who are involved in making this film. I think we are just going to mention them now, and then the narrative of the film is very simple in a way. Actually, it's this basically a samurai turned Ronin turns up at the mansion or mansion is it mansion only right of the E clan.
Yeah, the
Uh,
E clan, yes.
in 1960, what is
In
it?
1630.
1630, May 13, 1960, 1630, sorry. He
Hmm.
turns up there and he basically tells them that, asks them essentially that
Suguma Hanshiro. Yeah, we are going
Sugamo
to
Hanshiro is
shout
the
this name
character.
because the
Yes,
O requires a shout.
yes.
Anyway, yes.
But he makes a request to basically so let me get this correct because there's this hierarchy which we were talking about, right? About the
This is
samurais.
important. This
Yeah,
is very
because
important. Yeah.
because we are not talking here to the shogunate. We are not talking here to to the clan's head who's below the shogunate. We are
Hmm.
not. We are talking to the clan's heads. Clan is called daimyo in.
Yeah, so basically there's the daimyo. Okay,
Yes.
there is a clan. The
Hmm.
estate of the clan is being led by the daimyo. But we are
Yes.
not talking to the daimyo. The Ronin who enters in this
Yeah.
movie in the beginning that is played by Nakadai, his
Yeah.
name is Sugumo Hanshiro.
Yes.
Okay, he comes to the E clan's
Mansion
daimyo,
only. I think it is
and
whatever I've
yeah,
written. Yeah.
basically
Yeah.
mention
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
says that he wishes to commit seppuku.
Yeah. Which is
Okay,
Harakiri. The title is different. I think Seppuku was supposed to
title,
be the title, right? Or
I
is it in
think so. Yes.
Japan and it's not in English?
It's
It's a
basically the same thing.
same thing.
So
Yeah. Which is
so
ritualized suicide in.
Japanese
Yeah.
ritualistic suicide by
Yeah.
disembowelment. If that sounds rough, it is. It
Very.
is very
Yes.
rough. Yes,
Yes.
and Kobayashi doesn't hold back
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. But yes, so the film is basically him asking that, and then the film very gradually revealing why he's there, what connection he potentially has with another person who asked of a similar request. And the film establishes it fairly early on that this has been a recurring thing
Hmm.
where downtrodden samurai turned rodents have sort of come out at the gate of E clans and they've basically used Harakiri as a way of just getting some donations and money so that it's almost like a threat. It's threatening the clan ki you give them money, otherwise they'll,
You give them money, otherwise they will commit seppuku without following the ritual, and that will
yeah,
bring dishonor to
shame.
the clan. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So I think that's been set up very much at the beginning, and then the film sort of uses Sugumo Hanshiro's story and his storytelling of another story, essentially, to peel back the facade. Not peel back. I think he cuts through it rather than peeling back. It's like, taking
So,
a sword and just ripping through the facade of the
so
Code of Honor, Samurai
yeah.
Code of Honor. Yeah.
Yeah, so because this podcast is already filled with context, and this podcast
Yes.
is almost becoming Japanese history 101 at this point. So
Yes.
sure, why the hell not?
Yeah.
So the practice of seppuku, okay,
Hmm.
during the Edo period, beforehand, seppuku used to be like, it used to be a form of defining characteristic used to be there used to be a long sword which is called the
Okay.
tachi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there used to be a short sword which is called the wakizashi. Okay, and
Okay.
there used to be tanto or the
Okay.
knife. Okay,
Yes.
so you can
Interesting.
take either the tachi, the wakizashi, or the tanto. You plunge it into the gut,
Yeah,
and then
we'll just get explicit with what the
this is
process is, because the film
yeah
is explicit with it
yeah
also.
because this
Yeah.
is ritualistic suicide. So
Mm.
let's go ahead, because why the hell
Yes.
not? So you plunge that into the gut, and then you slice the abdomen horizontally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you then do it vertically also, just to make like
Yeah.
a cross, or is it just horizontally? It's
So,
basically until your guts start falling out of your body,
yeah,
and
basically.
then the person swordsman
So,
behind
so
you
there
sort of.
is those. So there used to be a person called the Kaisha Kunin. The
Mhm.
Kaisha Kunin hadn't emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries. Okay.
Sure.
So in the
Okay.
12th and 13th centuries, because of the absence of the Kaisha Kunin, the
Hmm.
samurai would then remove the blade. Okay. And then stab himself in the throat. Okay. Or fall onto the blade. Like, this is like, how do I
Jesus
put this?
Christ.
Yeah.
No.
Fall onto the blade from a standing position with it positioned against his heart.
My
Like,
God.
this is ultimate full massive impact factor at this point.
My God.
And
Yeah.
okay, because it sounds so morbid, let me be very clear. This ritual used to be done because so that the samurais would not be caught alive under the
Hmm.
hands of the enemy. That's what seppuku used to be
Yeah.
responsible for.
Hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
honor बाद में आता है.
Sure. It was basically to escape, like not die at the hands of your enemy,
Not
right?
die at
That's
the
all.
hands of the enemy.
Yeah. Here, there's
During,
no such thing though, right?
there is
So,
no such thing.
yeah.
So during the Edo period, because
Yeah.
now we are getting into Harakiri, and
Hmm.
before you think that we are digressing, believe me, we are not.
No,
The
no, this
movie
is
also
all
takes
in
a
the.
lot of time in
Yes.
exploring what this
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Okay. So during the Edo period, carrying out of the seppuku became a very elaborate and detailed ritual. And this used to
Yes.
be performed in front of spectators. Okay.
Yeah.
As
People used to
opposed to
basically sit and like,
sit
yeah.
around. Like, this is
Yeah.
like a gladiatorial fight, except there were no gladiators. Just one guy
Yeah.
comes and then kills himself.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So
And this was
this is
basically being taught essentially as like to students of like samurai students, as like, look at, this is the, code of honor, and look at how valorous this person is, etc., etc. Yes.
So a samurai would be first bathed in cold water
Yes.
so that he wouldn't go through excessive bleeding. Okay.
Yeah.
Science. There is science involved in this. Okay. He would then be dressed in a white kimono called the Shiro
Yes.
Shozoku.
Yeah.
Then he would be served his favorite food for a last meal, because
Yeah.
you're putting a lamb out to slaughter, because why the hell not?
Yeah.
So when he has
खाना भी
finished,
बाहर आएगा साथ साथ जब
exactly,
disembowelment
yeah,
होगा,
सब
of
बाहर
course.
आएगा. फायदा क्या है इतना बनाने का, जो भी हो. Yeah. So when he
Yeah.
had finished, the knife and the cloth would be then placed on a sanbo. If I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
hold on for a second. Yeah, sanbo used to be the stand which we see in the movie. There is a stand,
Mhm.
a seat kept opposite,
Mhm.
Shugomo or the other or his son-in-law who comes,
Yeah.
son-in-law who actually comes. Okay.
Yeah.
So now the white kimono which he would be given is the ceremonial dress. Okay. So
Yeah.
dressed ceremonially with his sword placed in front of him and sometimes seated on a platform or on special, clothes specifically used for
Yes.
seppuku. Okay.
Yes.
The warrior would then prepare for death by writing a death poem because it is
Okay.
not enough.
Okay.
Because this is not enough.
Hmm.
He would prepare death poem, then he would drink a ceremonial drink of sake. Okay.
Okay.
And then would give it to the attendant. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is the Edo period. The Kaisha Kunin is standing by. Okay.
He
The Kaisha
chooses it,
Kunin,
right? He chooses him
yeah.
if he
He's
has a
given the
choice.
option. He's
Yeah.
given the option that I will die under the hands of this guy.
Yes. That whatever swordsman he thinks is,
Yeah.
he
Capable
likes.
of
Capable.
slicing the head
Yes.
off under one blow, by one blow, which
Yes.
never
Yeah.
happens, by the way. So anyway, doesn't matter. So
Yeah.
with the selected Kaishakunin standing by, he would open his kimono, take up the tanto. Let me remind you, the tanto is the small knife.
Small
Okay.
knife. Yes.
The tanto held by the blade with a cloth wrapped around it so that it would not cut his hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Or cause him to
Wow.
lose his grip. Okay.
Cutting the hand is the problem here. Yes.
Cutting the hand is the problem here. And then plunge it into his abdomen, making a left to right cut.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the Kaishakunin would then perform the Kaishaku because that is why Kaishakunin is named.
Sure.
The
Okay.
Kaishaku.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Kaishaku is the cut in which the warrior is partially decapitated.
Okay. I'll have to put an explicit, not because of language for the first time, I think, just because of what all we have to describe in detail. But yes, yeah.
Yeah. So once that happens, the maneuver should be done in the manners of the dakikubi. The dakikubi basically means embraced head, in which a slight band of flesh is left attaching the head to the body. Okay?
Jeez.
So that the head would be embraced because, it's like giving your life off in a ceremonial pattern and then the head would be stored.
Yeah.
That's basically it. Because of the precision necessary for such a maneuver, the Kaishakuni needed to be a skilled swordsman.
Skilled swordsman. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is why samurais would be utilized either in administrative positions or
And
as
correct me,
swordsmen
the
for
samurai
seppuku.
had the long sword, right? The tachi
Yeah.
or
Yeah. The
yes,
Tachi or the Wakizashi. If I'm not
wakizashi.
mistaken, in this movie, Wakizashi is more explicitly used
Sure. Yes. Got it.
for Harakiri.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
think from sorry, you have other things to add. I'm going to say ki I'm just going to keep the listeners in on what weapon is used here in one case, which is
Yeah, because that is the twist. That is the
yes,
actual quote unquote twist. Okay.
yes,
The principal, that is the person who is committing the seppuku, because we are
yes,
talking about banking terms at this point. So the
yes,
principal and the Kaishokunin would agree in advance when the Kaishokunin would make the cut.
yes,
Over time, the process became so ritualized that as soon as the samurai would reach for his blade, okay, the Kaishakunin would strike.
reach for his blade, as in like
As in
once
the
he's cut
tanto.
himself.
And
Oh.
as his tanto.
As in he's not even started cutting himself like that.
He's not even started cutting himself. The samurai would reach for his blade. Over time, it becomes so ritualized that blade भी जरूरत नहीं था. एक fan लो तब भी काट देगा.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
Okay. I don't think it is yikes. I think it is efficient because it actually
better than this
decreases the
actually.
bloodshed.
Yes, better
It actually
than
decreases the bloodshed,
yes,
making
that's
sure the
true.
carpet doesn't get stained with blood and all.
Wow, that is like another big concern here. Carpet not getting stained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it is also important because this firmly grounds Harakiri as
Yes.
in the beginning of the Edo period.
Yeah.
क्योंकि
Yeah.
वहां पे इतना सब कुछ consideration नहीं था. काटना
Yeah.
तुम्हें पड़ेगा.
Yes, you have to disembowel yourself 100% at that point. Like that is needed to be done to be considered even Harakiri, I think, at that point in time. And I think the great thing about what our elaborate setup here is that we've kind of mentioned and we've kind of jokingly also sort of punctured the sanctity of all this, like of all this, which the film very much does actually throughout. Like, because I think Well, I watched it like 2-3 times now, but I think the first so it begins very much. I think there's a lot of ways in which I think from the very beginning Masaki Kobayashi sort of punctures this sort of formal, clean, moralistic sort of point of view that these guys have. Actually, it's not moral at all. It's actually really warped in a moral, like the morality is warped according
Hmm.
to because of their codes. But I think when Sugumo Hanshiro goes to tell the story, first to be not to tell the story. Firstly, he's going and he's warned by Saito Kageo, the counselor of the Daio's head, essentially there. He's
Hmm.
warned by him that we've had an incident recently where someone else came here, but it was one of the most sort of horrific things they got to see as a quote unquote spectacle
Hmm.
because
I am
and then he
going
sort
to.
of details the story of
Hmm.
who later is revealed to us to be
To be something much more
Nakara's.
important to
Yeah,
the
yeah,
main
yeah,
character. I'm
yeah.
going to puncture the seriousness again here
Sure.
with a
Okay.
bit of dark humor. Okay.
Okay.
So I am also researching the book called the Hagakure, in which
Okay.
most of this information is actually given. In
Okay.
Hagakure, one of the scholars had written that for ages past, it had been considered an ill omen by samurai to be requested as Kaishaku Kunin. Okay,
Why?
the guy who would cut the head off.
Yeah.
The reason for this is that one gains no fame even if the job is well done. So this is the thankless job. Okay, that is number one. Number two, if one should blunder,
Yeah.
it becomes a lifetime disgrace.
My
Okay.
God. So this is the bigger again issues, such big issues.
No, this
Yes.
is not the hilarious bit. The hilarious bit is this. In the
Yeah.
practice of past times, okay,
Yeah.
there were instances when the head flew off.
Okay.
That is why it was said that it was best to cut, leaving a little skin remaining so that it did not fly off.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is why the
Luckily,
that is why the ducky kubi option, the embraced head comes into the picture.
sure. No, but
Hmm.
I think I mean again, Kobayashi. Firstly, I don't think could go that explicit at that point in time
I mean,
to
he
show.
went pretty explicit
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So I think yeah. So I think one of the things is that the first I don't want to say half, but first 30-40 minutes of the film is basically Saito Kagayo, the counselor, telling Sugume the story of this person, uh, Chijiba
Hmm.
Motome, who came to his clan essentially, and then quote unquote performed or like acted that he's going to commit suicide, but actually
Chijiwa
he
Motome had made the
he
same
didn't have
request
any
as Hashiro.
intention,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm. Hmm, hmm.
And they got to know this because once he had gone to sort of take a bath, he takes the bath, right?
He takes the bath.
He
Yes.
takes the bath, he wears the kimono also, what you had said
Hmm.
before, and then after
And
that
Motome here had requested for a couple of days delay.
after they say they have like during this they have a discussion together with all the other samurais, the Saito, Kagayo, and the other people
Hmm.
in the room. They go in
Three
another
most
room.
senior samurai of the
Three more
clan. Yes.
yes, they sort of have a discussion about do you think he actually means to do so, or is he just
Or is
being
this a quote unquote suicide bluff?
bluff? Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Because that had also been rising at that point.
yes, yes,
All
and
right.
this is against ronins, of course, samurais who've become ronins because they don't have employment, as we've said, like Edo
They don't
period
have
mein.
employment, yes.
Yeah.
Because war is over and these
Hmm.
samurais are lost trying to
Hmm.
understand what jobs they could take.
Yeah. And I think the more they sort of so when this guy says Chichiba says that he doesn't have where he
He
wants two
needs
or
a couple
three
of days delay, yes.
yeah, and then they are very vehemently sort of no, you
Hmm.
can't have that. We are basically going to set an example by making you have to commit seppuku.
Hmm.
uh
And this vehement reaction is made even worse because when they examine Motome's swords, they find that the blades are made of bamboo.
yes, he doesn't have any
He
tanto
doesn't have
also.
the actual Tanto swords.
Yeah.
which for the actual samurai is a huge matter of disgrace,
Yes.
because according to
Yeah.
them that means the samurai is quote unquote pawning his soul.
Yes. And
Okay.
after doing so, then they
Hmm.
take him to the place, and
Hmm.
he sort of
He's forced to commit the suicide himself using those bamboo blades,
yes.
which is already painful and extremely humiliating.
Yes. And I think that is, I still think, the most gruesome sequence of the film, because I think it's
Hmm.
not to do with the amount of, you know, explicit thing you see, but it's just the effort. Like he and Kobayashi shows you the effort he's trying to commit, the disembowelment when he's pushing the bamboo blade through his stomach. So I
Hmm.
think that is one of those scenes where I was just like, how can a spectator, as a person sitting there watching it, just, and of course, it's not right to project your things that you think today onto those people, but it's just the dehumanization that happens at that point in time in the name of quote unquote honor is
Hmm.
so appalling almost, that it's sort of, Harakiri then becomes a film in which I actually enjoy the revenge. I
Yes.
I can say that I take pleasure in whatever Sugume does to sort of, and the idea is also because his revenge is not as nearly as actually immoral or extreme in a sense. It is made to feel extreme by Samurai Code's honor, but he actually doesn't, like, sit there and see these people commit harakiri in this horrible, horrible fashion. So I think the second half of the film very much becomes something which,
The second half of the film is basically Sugume. So Sugume requests for the swords request for a swordsman.
first,
Okay.
but I think he is also like, he to show how honorable his harakiri is. He doesn't take the bath, he doesn't take the kimono. He's basically like, let me
Hmm.
go outside. Let's
Let
just,
me go outside. So what he
yeah,
basically is doing is he's not following the Edo period ka seppuku. He's
yes.
following the older period ka seppuku,
Hmm.
which is for these people considered much more honorable,
So it's like more simple, even like it's less to
more
do with,
simple, more
the,
brutal. Yes.
yes. And he goes there, he sits there, and then
Hmm.
this happens like 40 minutes into the 2 hour, 10-minute film. And
Hmm.
you're like, at least I was first time, and I was like, what are we doing here exactly? This is 40 minutes into the film, right? Like,
Hmm.
where are we going from here?
Hmm.
Because it feels like a climax, because he's there sort of waiting to commit seppuku, and then he's basically like, wait a second, I want to request someone
Hmm.
for to be my sort, I forgot the term,
Hmm. No, no,
what
I
was it
got
called,
what you're talking about. Yes.
the swordsman, essentially, who's going to
Yeah, the
behead him.
swordsman. Yes, the
Yeah,
Kaisha Kunin. Yes.
Kaisha Kunen, yes. So the first person he requests is suspiciously not there.
All of these persons who he requests are suspiciously not there.
Yes, this
There
sort
he
of gives
requests.
him the time to talk
Yeah.
about his story, right? Which,
Why
uh,
he came here.
yes.
Yeah.
And then we sort of see the connection between
We
him and
see the
Chichiba
connection that basically Chijima Motome is Sugome's son-in-law
slash godson also,
slash
which is,
godson.
yeah,
Why godson? Because his father was also killed due to seppuku.
yes, yeah. And actually, he
Hmm.
told Tatsuya Nakadai's character not to commit it
Not to
for the
commit it,
honor,
but to look
because,
after his
but to
son.
look
Yeah.
after his son, yes.
Yeah.
Which at that
And
point in
this
time was dishonorable for him also, right?
Yes,
Uh,
and this is also the moment in which people wonder how samurais became ronin. This is how, because their masters commit seppuku once their
yes,
shoguns are disbanded.
yeah,
When
yeah,
the shoguns are disbanded, these masters commit seppuku as ordered by the Tokugawa shogunate or whoever,
yeah,
and then they have to then all the samurais who are taken under their retainers became effectively ronins because they are
yes,
quote unquote masterless samurai.
masterless, yeah.
Ronins aren't looked at in the best of terms, and while
Hmm.
ronins would be looked at in other movies, other chanbara or
Hmm.
samurai movies as heroes or underdogs, going from
Hmm.
village to village looking for
Hmm.
food and working as
Hmm.
mercenaries. Kobayashi shows us the, unwelcome side, the much more darker, brutal side in which,
Yeah.
they are raised in poverty,
Mhm.
you know, eventually convincing them to marry,
Yes.
basically the Godson and
Yeah.
Sugome's daughter to marry, so
Yeah.
that so that she would not sell herself off as a concubine.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why this poverty is occurring? This poverty is occurring because of the Bushido, because
Hmm.
of these rules that had been implemented.
Yes. Yeah.
What caused this government to enforce peace for such a long time also becomes a dictatorial form of
Mhm.
enforcement,
Yes. Yeah.
this is a feudal system which would not allow any well-paying work for ronins. Okay.
Yes.
So in this case, when the both of them have a son, right? Sugome's
Yes.
son,
Mhm.
Sugome's
I forgot
son
the
in
name.
yeah,
No, so son-in-law has a son with
son-in-law
Saito.
has a
Yes.
son who
Yeah.
dies, who
Yes.
basically dies. He's
There's an
betrayed.
extended flashback sequence in which you see
Yeah,
not only you see the reason why Chijima actually went is because he was desperate to look for help because
hmm.
his wife was super ill and his son had caught a bad fever. So I
His
think,
son had got a bad
yeah,
fever, and that is why he had rushed off. He had
and
heard
that is
of
why
the
he had
suicide
sold
bluffs.
off.
He had heard of the suicide bluffs. This is the
Yes,
irony. He had heard of the
yes,
suicide bluffs, and he had
yeah,
wanted to do the suicide bluffs so that he could
yes,
get some money. That
yes,
money would be held. The problem is the suicide bluff worked a bit too well because they actually thought that he's actually going to commit seppuku.
yes. And I think it's also just this idea that he sold off his sword also
Yeah.
when because of the poverty, because whatever money he could get to save his wife and son. And I
Hmm.
think the whole idea then is, I mean, there's another cruel sequence where these three swordsmen, the three retainers of the E clan, go and sort of laugh at his dead body
They laugh
uh,
at his dead body because of the use of the
in
bamboo
front of
swords.
Suguma and
In front of
and
Suguma and his daughter.
wife and yeah, his daughter
While
and
the
his
son who
yeah.
is sleeping
Hmm.
is slowly deteriorating and
Hmm.
is going to die,
Yeah.
immediately in the next scene.
Yeah.
Like if you thought that the seppuku sequence was bad enough,
Yeah.
like Kobayashi doesn't hold back. He doubles
Yeah.
down on the horror of it all
Yeah.
and the entire sadness of it all
Yeah.
without giving you an
It's not
opportunity to take a
it's
breath.
not sentimental though. I think neither is it exploitative because you don't see the, son
Hmm.
dying or the um or the wife dying essentially. It's this whole idea that it happens and it's very tragic. And even when Sugumo, like one of the things which he says after narrating a story is that all I want is to go to my son-in-law and with the knowledge that you acknowledged, like the samurai clan acknowledged that they did a
They
mistake.
did a mistake.
They could have acted in a better way.
Hmm.
Essentially he says that he wants just that.
Hmm.
uh and then it's almost like the samurai clan doubles down on their thing and it's like, uh
Hmm.
we are not going to do this. It's almost like we are he was a traitor, or he was basically a blackmailer who was trying to, get us to agree to his rules. Chijiva was. And then it's the whole three flashbacks you get. Like it's almost like three slices. Like to me it was very interesting when the second time I was watching, the extended sequence you get of Chijiva putting
Hmm.
the bamboo stick up his desk, like to disembowel. To me it was like
He's
almost a
cutting through the. Hmm.
revenge for all three in like three different slices. Almost it was like,
Yes.
cutting through. And his revenge is also very quote unquote, it's just to expose the facade more than to kill
Yeah,
them,
because
right?
yeah, in
Yeah.
in that sense, we see that he's cutting off the top knots of
Yes.
those
The
three
Sam.
samurais.
Yes.
Cutting off the top knots of the three samurais is also a sign of disgrace because
Hmm.
you can't let your hair flow, you know,
Yes. And
like.
then
Mm,
I think the big thing is that none of the three had the courage to sort of be truthful and, commit seppuku because their honor was gone. All of them are
Yeah.
sort of hiding until their
Hmm.
one or two of them are hiding and one of them commits suicide. So because their top knots have been cut off. So and he
Because the top notch, yes.
throws the top knots at the sort of pedestal of the samurai and sort of then is I think also the time when Nakada's performance goes from otherwise he's very reserved actually throughout a lot of the film but
Until
uh,
until the third act, in which his
yeah
story is finally reaching its inevitable conclusion, he becomes
yeah
almost like demonic in his anger, right?
hysterically yeah absolutely
Yeah.
but I also love some of the instances where he taunts him. What
Hmm.
does seppuku mean? Like this, I mean, I know people can't see, but it's like he's taunting them almost to see what do you mean by what are you
Yeah.
saying? Are you saying like this action of like disemboweling yourself?
Hmm.
And I think I mean we can end this discussion because I know we'll otherwise dwell too much on Harakiri, but we can sort of then segue to Samurai Rebellion. But I think it results in a
Yeah.
sequence of genuine I would like to say it's action but like it's such a messy in a good way in a sort of choreographically it's so messy that it doesn't feel like it's been choreographed if that makes sense like it doesn't feel like a choreographed
I
action.
wouldn't call it messy per se. I would call it like very well choreographed. It's not as well choreographed as Kurosawa. I think
Yes.
it's really not as well choreographed
Yeah.
as Kurosawa, and I don't think that's a problem per se, because
Yes.
Kurosawa's choreography and staging of action sequences are the reason why
Yeah.
his commercial movies got so much acclaim.
Yes.
But I think Harakiri, I think Kobayashi, then we have Hideo Gosha.
Hmm.
Gosha though was more balletic in his
Sure.
action, like say Inugaki. Okay,
Sure.
all these directors,
Hmm.
even if they weren't exactly more fluent in staging the choreography of the action
Hmm.
sequences, they focus more on the visceral nature of the action
Yeah.
sequence.
Nee, I think what I mean by messy is messy. The action sequence isn't messy. I think, to put it correctly, I think Sugumo's way of doing the actions is not,
It's not balletic, it's not
skilled
choreographed.
yeah, like
Yeah,
it feels like because
he's running, it's very
yeah
rough and tumble. Yeah.
running he's using like the sand that is on the ground to distract the people and then
Hmm.
I think there's the interesting thing because the opening credits we see the samurai mansion in all its glory and then you have the blood spilling on one of the biobos, the
Yeah.
collapse of the doors happening when he's falling through them
Hmm.
and and then he like reaches towards the statue.
The coup de
the,
grace, I would like to call it,
okay,
which is
yeah,
the empty samurai armor,
yes,
which is what the movie also opens with. The movie opens
yes,
with the empty samurai armor, the movie
yeah,
closes with the empty samurai armor,
yeah,
which you can take it as whatever way you want. We can take it as the overall meaning of bureaucracy.
mm.
you know
I mean, I think
it
I
is
mean, it's
filled with
definitely,
bluster. The armor
yeah,
is filled with bluster, but at the end there is nothing inside.
yes. I mean, he
It's
shows that because he throws it onto
He
the,
throws it. It's
yeah,
rituals.
yeah,
Rituals are covering all of the empty bravado of
mm,
all these samurais hidden under the code of Bushido. The
hmm,
overall samurai armor could be Bushido
yeah,
personified, Bushido actualized anyway. That
yeah.
is the
But
entire armor of the samurai.
the interesting thing is, and this is why I think Harakiri is one of his more quote unquote positive works, which is a very weird thing to say because it is a bleak work in
Hmm.
general. But like because you open with almost a mystical view of the statue of the armor, right?
Hmm.
The time when you by the time you end it, it's been tarnished in a way which I think is sort of unforgettable. Like it's this whole idea because you have the voiceover of Saito basically forging the truth of
Hmm.
nothing exactly happened, everyone died because of some illness. All this sort of accumulates to me at least at the end and I'm like I can see the machinations now behind that armor and I'll remember how those machinations are being put together as opposed to the
Exactly.
armor,
I
which
know
I
what
think
the
is
armor used to be before. I know what the
yes.
armor used to actually stand for, rather than this.
Yes, the what it is shown in the last frame, if that makes sense. So it's like one of those.
I think Harakiri also worked, extensively well in US and everybody else, because
Hmm.
I think Harakiri also showed that humanity exactly doesn't learn.
Yes.
Because anti-establishment was a big thing in the 62. If we remember what is currently happening in US at
Yes.
that time, the Vietnam War was going on.
Yes,
When
yes,
the
yes.
Vietnam War will end, we will see exactly the same thing that would happen as that had happened with the samurais. We would see the
Yes.
exact same thing that would be happening with the veterans.
Veterans,
You know,
yes.
the veterans would return from the war, but instead of getting the quote unquote glory which they had thought that they would receive
Yes.
because of their predecessors who had actually been participant in the quote unquote world wars, the Vietnam War wasn't a war that America acknowledged or the America wanted
Yes.
to celebrate. That is why the veterans would not be treated with the same amount of splendor. On the contrary, they would be scorned.
Yeah.
And this feels Harakiri, I think hit the Americans much more during that time around when it
Yeah.
finally came about the
And
movie.
now I think it has such, like, it now also does feel so, because we have that whole, post-truth era almost, where you get this
Yes.
idea of truths being constructed on the fly
Yeah,
by
also,
people.
yeah, post-truth
And
era,
yeah,
the elections are coming in
yeah,
both America as well as India, in
yeah,
which, fake news, constructed narratives,
yes, yeah,
constructed truths which
yeah,
become gospels
yes,
that would be passed around for generation to generation. You
yeah,
know, again, humanity doesn't learn.
yeah. Yeah,
That is why
I mean,
that is why
mm,
art as anti-establishment is essential.
yes, absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
uh,
I mean,
you
and I
know,
think there, you can't find anyone more anti-establishment than him. Like most overtly also, like I think, and there's not a
he's
problem with
very
that.
overt about it. I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah.
he
And
will
there's
ever
absolutely
hate
no
it.
problem with it also. Because I think, especially if like, if you've seen sort of Human Condition trilogy and you know his story of the
Like,
Imperial Army, it's just,
yeah, like he would be conscripted, right? He would
yeah.
be he would be
He was
conscripted and
tortured, I think, or at
yeah, he
one
would be
point in time.
conscripted and
Mm,
tortured. Like
mm,
if I'm not mistaken, I haven't seen
mm,
this movie, but just putting it
mm.
out there. His third film is called The Thick Walled Room. Okay,
Yes. Mm,
which was about the treatment of Japanese war criminals by their own government.
yeah. Hmm.
Which,
It's,
because I'm
yeah.
bringing up the Vietnam War, he
Mm,
saw a puppet government of America anyway.
yeah. Yeah. I
So
mean,
that was like a direct
yeah.
commentary anyway.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can, again, with the Human Condition trilogy, it can't get more direct than that. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
and
Like
it
he
came
used to
like
be a
12 hours,
pacifist.
12 years
Kobayashi used to be a
after.
pacifist, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He was a pacifist who was conscripted into the Japanese army. He refused
Mm,
every promotion. He remained under the rank of private until he was captured and kept as a prisoner of war.
yeah,
He hated the levels, he hated the treatment in the prison system.
yeah.
He hated that he would be ordered to do war crimes. Okay.
Very much
And
individual over institution, if that makes. I think
yes.
that's the big sort of thing for a
And
lot of.
especially when the institution is such an unjust
Yes,
institution.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. His
Uh,
target was always the power of the system, not the
yes.
people who were, you know,
The,
actualizing the commands.
that's an interesting sort of segue into Samurai Rebellion also, because I think it's sort of a, marriage in some ways of Human Condition trilogy and Harakiri, of course, because it's the writer is same, DOP is not same actually. DOP is Kazuo Yamada,
Hmm.
but music is same, editor same, director of course same. You have Tatsuya Nakada in a supporting role in this, though, and the main star attraction is Toshiro Mifune. That's also because it's produced by Mifune's production company. I think it was their first production, if I've
Yes.
got it right.
Hmm.
Toho is also involved in this, not just
Hmm.
Mifune.
I think Toho, okay, so the bit of history here.
Yes,
So, Samurai Rebellion was based on the story Hairyo Suma Shimatsu.
Shimatsu. Yes,
The story was written by Yasuhiko Takiguchi,
yeah,
okay, upon which the script was based on, okay.
yes.
But the retention of the story's title, okay,
Hmm.
the original Japanese title used to be Joiuchi
Okay,
Suma Shimatsu, which
okay,
basically means like Joiuchi is rebellion. Okay, Joiuchi
sure.
means rebellion.
Hmm.
Rebellion dash receive the wife.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's an
that is the
interesting
main.
title too. Yeah,
Yeah.
like to, yeah. I mean, I like Samurai Rebellion quite a bit. Just also because
I am not the biggest fan. I think I liked it enough, but I don't
Yeah.
think it reaches Harakiri's levels. I
Oh no,
think
definitely not. I think
I
I
think
mean
what it is dealing with is it dealing with two different fallouts. It's
sure.
dealing with the government, but it's also dealing with domestic fallout as a result of Bushido.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I'll get to what my sort of quote unquote flaws are with the movie.
Sure,
Other
sure. No
than
problem. I mean,
yeah,
again, I don't think it's anywhere near
Hmm.
the strength of Harakiri, but I do think it's like I have a little. I think I digest his Jidaigeki films much better than his other like his war films. I think,
His war films,
though,
yes.
yeah, I think the violence in that is so explicit, and the films are so miserable throughout that I just find it a bit, and it's understandable why they are miserable. It's just uh, there are character like I think he's going for a mainstream approach in those very overtly. So in
Yes.
these, I think he's more he's also
I
contained
think
more in his
he's not.
aesthetic.
I think he doesn't want so much of a mainstream approach. He's making these movies explicitly Japanese. I think the
Yeah, but I think Human
distributors want a.
Condition has like that really,
Hmm.
music score is very
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
artificially syrupy, if that makes
Yes, yes,
sense.
yes,
Whereas
yes, yes.
here, I think Takemitsu's score is very like methodical. Actually, at some points, he has like that one or two notes keep on playing actually as a percussion almost sometimes. With that
Hmm.
Biva is used a lot, which we'll also
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
when
The
we talk
Biwa is
about.
necessary in this. Yeah,
We will
the
talk
Biwa
about
also
with
becomes
Kwaidan.
quite important in Kwaidan.
Kwaidan, yes.
Yeah.
So no, I think this what Amartya said about the story is about rebellion is actually quite true, and I think one of the ways
I
in
think what you will also learn, I think what you
Hmm,
will also realize is that none of Kobayashi's movies can exactly be explained in a one-word sentence. Like
yes,
pitching these movies is a, nightmare.
yeah.
You
I
don't know
mean
how to pitch these
the
movies.
plot I've taken from IMDb is like when I read it, I was like, this sounds a bit confusing
This
because
sounds like nothing.
the mother of a feudal lord's only heir is kidnapped away from her husband by the lord.
Hmm.
The
Yeah, it
husband and
doesn't
his
work.
father, yeah, like that sentence is so confusing only. But
Hmm.
then so basically it's about again entrenched power in many ways, and this time we are uh, sort of talking from the rebellion within. There's
Hmm.
no outsider who's coming and sort of
Hmm.
breaking through the system like in Harakiri.
Hmm.
It's the Ronin turned samurai going to the samurai. Here you have the samurai working within the shogunate's control, like the
Yeah,
daimyo's
let us
control.
put
Yes.
that into context.
Hmm.
Samurai Rebellion takes place on
725.
1727,
Yes.
a century later.
Yes.
Okay, this is essential to realize. This
Yes.
movie is taking place a century later. By
Yeah.
this time, the Tokugawa shogunate has become so entrenched in power and authority that totalitarian excess is the rule at this point. Okay,
Hmm.
that is the norm.
Hmm.
And this is why, the movie is dealing with two poles at this
Hmm.
point, both
Hmm.
the excess and the effect of authority, as
Hmm.
well as the family and the domestic fallout, and the woman and the refusal of the woman
Hmm.
in a domestic household to remain victimized.
Yes.
That is the perspective of Samurai Rebellion.
Yeah.
it's
And
it's
but
a it's a very ambitious perspective.
yeah.
I don't know how much it works totally
Sure.
in a coherent
No,
fashion.
I think, but the beginning of the film is very much reminiscent of this whole idea of these are people who've basically been employed, so they are not in the position of Sugume in Harakiri, but I think
Yeah,
in
it's a century later. They are more
huh,
like entrenched
but
within the employment.
they are
Yeah.
still without war, and I think the first sequence is him cutting through a haystack, or
Yes.
like a which is quite a funny sort of it's like
Hmm.
you don't have actual enemies now, and you're living in peacetime, so you have the luxury of
Hmm.
practicing in front of your clan leader,
Hmm.
and then they show this sort of friendship between him and Nakadai, who's actually got a very supporting role, like he's barely there throughout the whole film,
Hmm.
actually. But
Pathan.
please, no. Uh,
You know exactly why I'm bringing that
yeah,
movie
but
up.
no, no, please, no. That no, but I think what Amartya is saying is true. I think the film takes. I mean, I think the film's ending is like the 20-25 minutes sort of elevated to a different level to me. Like I think those are like just haunting to me on a sort of visceral level. But a
Hmm.
lot of the film is sort of juggling these beats where it has to establish a relationship between husband and wife, which is supposed to be this really pure, really emotionally affecting relationship, and then how that affects their father-in-law, who fights for them, and then sort of juggle that with his fight of being in a, you know, his decision to act against the shogun, the daimyo clan's leader or not. So the basic sort of setup though is that the daimyo clan leader has an ex-concubine wife who he wants to get married to someone else, right? He wants to basically
So
divorce her, get rid
basically,
of
he
her.
wants to basically beforehand he wanted the concubine to go away. Okay,
Yes.
that's why he sent the concubine to Toshiro Mifune's family, that the
Yeah, and
concubine will be
forcefully married her actually. Like
forcefully married her because
it's
he's
not an
pregnant,
option.
because the concubine is pregnant.
Oh,
Okay.
now I remember that, but I do like some of the sequences where uh, Mifune is basically like, but I can't get her married because I can't disrespect the person
Yes.
in charge. Like
And
he
every time
tries to use the
and he
bureaucracy
repeats that,
to, yes,
and the
he,
repetition falls on deaf ears.
yeah, he
It's
tries
like,
to use the bureaucracy essentially in a way to not accept the offer of the
hmm.
wife essentially, which is I thought was interesting. But yes, go ahead.
You
Sorry, you
know
were saying.
what, I realized something.
Hmm.
I just realized this. Like Kobayashi is also commenting on history being
Hmm.
written by victors, right?
Mhm,
All
yeah,
these
yeah.
all these events, which both in Harakiri as well
Harakiri
as in
and this.
Samurai Rebellion,
Hmm.
all these events are significant events, but
Yes.
they aren't recorded in the annals of history. By
Yeah.
the end of Harakiri, the event is explicitly stated that this event should be
Yeah.
moved away, removed from the face of.
Narratives. No, I think that's where the whole false narrative sort of come
Yeah, the
into
false
play. Yeah.
narrative again
Hmm.
begins. Like
Mhm.
the garden is being set up at the end of Harakiri.
Yes.
The garden is being set up again. Everything is
Cleaned. The
cleaned again.
ponytails are being cleaned.
Ponytails are being cleaned. All of it is cleaned.
The
Yeah.
blood on the biobus is sort of being,
Yeah.
washed, scrubbed out, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the Samurai Rebellion also same thing happens. It's like
A
how
story
it
goes
ends.
untold, sort of
Yeah,
basically.
the
Yeah.
story goes untold.
Mm.
And nobody in the Tokugawa shogunate will ever know what this
Yeah.
Aizu, the daimyo's
Aizu
name is
clan. Yes.
Aizu daimyo. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the Aizu daimyo had actually done. Nobody will
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Interesting.
But no, we can because it overlaps a fair bit with this idea of fighting against the fascistic, because I think fascism is very much central to an idea
Mm.
of these films like this. But yeah, you were saying what sort of the juggling. Do you think the film doesn't manage to juggle the
No,
female sort of perspective and the other thing, or?
no, I don't think it's the juggling more sort
Hmm.
of. I think it's more like, I think the filmmaking is somewhat fails here because
Okay.
I genuinely think that the filmmaking takes on the more melodramatic approach and it
Sure.
kind of becomes more dated, like the zoom in
Hmm.
cameras,
Got it. Got it.
waiting so much time for monologues to go on and on and on and doesn't complete, and then suddenly, and then waiting around for reaction shots,
Sure.
waiting for it becomes way more artificial, like the
Got it.
artificial is
Hmm.
noticeable now.
Understandable. Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
get what you mean. I get what you
Yeah,
mean.
the
And I think,
artificial is, yeah, the
mhm,
artifice is more noticeable. Like the
sure.
action sequences again. Like
Mm,
I don't know. I understand what Kobayashi is trying to do.
mhm.
He's building the event up until a massive crescendo occurs in the final
Yes,
act.
yes,
Like
yes,
it
yes,
worked extremely well in Harakiri. You know,
yes, yeah,
and you aren't supposed to feel any sort of catharsis by that
yeah,
crescendo. You were supposed to feel like, oh my god, what the hell happened?
yeah,
that
yeah,
that is
yeah,
that
yeah.
is supposed to be a
Mhm.
feeling. Here, though, I think it works in the opposite direction. And I
Okay.
also think that is because of Toho itself.
Mm,
First of all, though, you are shooting the film in Toho scope. Okay, for
mhm,
people who don't know what Toho scope
mhm,
is basically cinema scope that Toho introduced in Japan and basically
mhm,
trademarked themselves because
mm.
business hai, हर जगह नाम देना
Yes,
पड़ता है. So
yes.
one very famous example of Toho scope being used is Akira Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. Whatever the
Mhm,
flaws of that movie looks gorgeous
mhm,
in Toho scope.
mhm,
Samurai Rebellion is also shot in Toho scope.
mhm.
You know, it makes sense for action sequences to be done very well in Toho scope, but for but for character drama to be made into
And there's
horoscope,
lots of it actually
yeah,
in this. For
yeah,
majority of it, it is a character drama. So
yeah, character drama to be done in Tohoscope, you need
screen's
to,
too wide
yeah,
for that.
it's too
Mm.
wide. Uh, and no disrespect to Kobayashi, he's a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
You are not Kurosawa. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. You need, for character development to work in a widescreen, you need composition to be done
Sure.
exceedingly well.
Yeah.
I think that composition is done well. There is a
Mm-hmm.
simplicity to the composition, especially in the staging, like how the
Mm-hmm.
family is sitting. Like there
Yes.
is a distance when the
Mm-hmm.
family is sitting on the floor eating. There's a distance between the
The
matriarch,
people who are sort of
and the and
agree
the
and disagree. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
younger
Mm.
brother,
Yeah.
and there is a closeness between the elder son and the
Mm-hmm.
wife and with Mifune.
Mm-hmm.
The composition, it's
I mean,
simplified. Yeah.
you're talking about, I think one of the best, weirdly, I actually prefer Samuel Rebellion's opening credit sequence to Harakiri's. I
Oh
think the
yeah,
opening credit
it's very,
sequence
how
in,
do I put this? It's very minimalist.
yeah, but I think it's just this whole idea. I think it begins with like these cracks or like the
Yes, yes,
foundation of the
yes.
building, which is like the
Yes, yes.
crevices and cracks. And then it shows just the foundation itself being so stern and, monumentally, like governing these things. Like it very much encapsulates a lot of the themes in a very
That also works
terrific
in the
way.
final action sequence, right? Because the house, right, in the final action sequence, the house breaks down. All the
Yes.
foundations are breaking down, right?
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
basically him commenting on, this is the establishment breaking down. Look at
Hmm.
what this is. Look at what happens when the establishment is breaking down because of
Yeah.
all these false bravado, all
Yeah.
of these false tenets,
Yes. Yeah.
you know?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean,
also,
see, bolo, bolo. Sorry.
I genuinely think that I love the female character in this movie. I
Oh yeah,
think,
Yoko Sukasa plays Ichi Sasahara, I think.
yes,
Yeah.
I think she's one of the more strong female characters in
Hmm.
this era of Japanese cinema.
Jidaigeki cinema in
This
general, or
era of
hmm.
Jidaigeki movies, yes, because
Hmm.
look at it from this perspective. This is a woman who is betrayed by authority, not once, but
Hmm.
twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's betrayed by authority twice.
Hmm.
And her strength
Hmm.
is admirable, especially compared to all the earlier depictions of women in these
Hmm.
Japanese movies who are mostly demure. You
Hmm.
know, like I can say that she is a much more strong character than all of the males around her, somewhat,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you think about this.
100%, I think. Yeah. I mean, Mifune
Yes.
sort of gradually becomes this ball of rage by the end.
Hmm.
But before that, it's very much
Hmm.
she who takes the
Yeah, Ren.
initiative in many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah. So I think, yeah, even the matriarch is powerful in her own different way, na, in this, I think.
Yeah,
Uh,
she's the
Entrenched into the
quote
power.
unquote antagonist. But no, while she's powerful, she's also like trapped in the typical
Yes, of course.
archetypes of the nagging wife who
Nag-
doesn't hate the
Mm-hmm.
husband, and the husband is basically like forced to be with her, and it feels
Hmm.
like trapped in an archetype which is
Sure,
not
sure.
exactly, which doesn't exactly fly nowadays.
Got it. Got it. Got it. No, interesting
Yeah.
points. I mean, again, I watched this I watched
Hmm.
this a while back now. So and just because we watch so many movies, some of the stuff, the specifics sort of start blurring a
Hmm.
little bit. But no, I mean, I remember I just do remember the opening sequence and final sequence being, probably the ones that did
Hmm.
elevate the film for me
Hmm.
in my head. And I feel
Like the
again,
final sequence is basically the battle between Tatsuo Nakadai's character and Toshiro
no,
Mifune's
no, no.
character.
After that, even like I find the
Oh,
whole
acha, acha, okay,
idea
okay.
of narrative being, crushed, like just the
Crushed
baby
under
being
the boot
left.
heel. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the muskets. I think you mentioned the Is it the muskets that they use
The
to
muskets,
shoot
yes.
him?
Yes.
So yeah, I think whatever the context we had sort of
The
set up,
matchlock guns,
matchlock. Sorry, yes,
which would then be, altered for
yeah.
Japan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this is just, I think it's the overwhelming sense in these films of, and Rebellion less so perhaps than Harakiri, but like, um, just not being able to topple the system in some sense, like just being,
Yeah,
doing
you're
your
fighting against
utmost.
an immovable object.
Yes, yeah,
Let's put this out. if it isn't, evident enough even more, this shogunate had been around for a century by the time Rebellion
Yeah.
story begins
Yeah.
and Harakiri's story ends. A century had passed.
Yeah.
The Bushido tenets was followed pretty regularly. There
Yeah.
is a reason why stories of all the samurai movies all take place during this Edo period, because
Mm.
it is all about these ronins. It's all about the failure of the
It's also
system when
probably
it.
cheaper to make now rather than stage the battle sequences, which
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like,
of course. That though is
yeah,
definitely one. There is a reason
yeah.
why there are 25, there are 20 freaking 5 Zatoichi movies.
Yeah. I mean,
Four
yeah.
movies would be released in a year. Four.
Wow. I mean, when but it's basically the whole, when stuff is popular, you milk it as much as you want to or can,
Yeah,
sort
they
of.
were very cheap to make. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if they're like basic Chambara movies, like
Mm.
Chambara movies are basically like hack and
Sword
slash movies. Okay.
hacking.
Yeah,
Okay.
sword hack and slash movies,
Mm.
Chambara movies. If they're like basic Chambara movies with basic plots, like most of the Zatoichi movies are,
Mm.
okay, if they're basic Chambara movies, they don't take much lot of time, and
Sure.
only the action sequences are what more or less remains memorable.
Got it.
That is why you can only go through 25 Zatoichi movies for so long before they start blurring against each other.
So it's basically the whole horror cycle in many ways, the horror franchise cycle in Hollywood in some ways, the
Yeah, yeah,
slasher
yeah,
film
yeah.
cycle in
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
senses,
It's
right?
more or
Yeah.
less that thing only.
Yeah.
Especially,
Yeah.
except that these movies, like, as these movies go into the later phases, you will see more and more experimental swings.
I mean, Sword of Doom is very pessimistic, right? Isn't it like
Sword of Doom is
totally?
extremely pessimistic.
I mean,
Like,
not that these films aren't, but like it's much more violent also, I
it's
think, right?
very violent. It's like
Yeah.
dark. It's very okay. Very weird comparison.
Uh,
It's like let me check who the director was of Sword of Doom.
okay.
I'm forgetting the name. I think it's Okadochi or something. Let me check once.
Okay.
Again, it's only because the Japanese names are so complicated and
I
extremely
also
hard to
don't know
pronounce
if
it.
we have to pronounce the surname first or the first name
Yeah,
first.
yeah, yeah. We don't
I
know
know
that.
because I was reading a couple of texts in which they do mention the second name first and then the first name
Hmm.
second. So yeah.
The director was Kihachi Okamoto.
Okay.
Kihachi Okamoto. So
Yeah.
Kihachi Okamoto is he is the Zack Snyder of that era, basically.
Amazing.
He is the Zack Snyder of that era. I'm not saying it just because of that. I'm saying it because his style is very deconstructionist
Sure. Sure. Got
of
it.
the samurai movies. I think one of the biggest examples of the deconstruction is a 1968 movie called Kill. I think Sword of
Okay.
Doom is also like a deconstruction,
Okay.
but Kill is definitely more deconstructionist. Kill is
Okay.
deconstructionist of the entire genre of those movies itself.
Interesting.
Like, it's directly commenting on the samurai movies, all of the tropes and
I
everything.
will be noting this down and watching it
Yeah.
sometime.
And
Um,
Sword of Doom is very much like a Kobayashi movie itself, because it is very critical of the Bushido as well as the Tokugawa period.
sure.
Except
Got
that this samurai is one violent a-hole
it.
in
Okay.
Sword of Doom.
Fine.
Yes.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Uh, I was trying to, the reason I mentioned horror cycle ka essentially
Hmm.
joke or whatever connection only to make a segue into Kwaidan,
Hmm.
which is Masaki Kobayashi's 1964 film, which is actually 3 years before he made Samurai Rebellion. It's his most expensive film, I think.
Hmm.
It's unfortunately also a film that tanked at the box office. He sold his home to make the film.
Hmm.
So it's good to know that the legacy of the film has very much, uh,
Yeah, it got an
in
Academy Award nomination also, if I'm not wrong.
nomination. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for
But
foreign language.
yes, it's written by Yoko Mizuki and it's based on quote stories and studies of
Studies
strange
of Strange
things.
Things by
Uh,
Lafcadio
Lafcadio
Horn.
Hearn, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Kwaidan Stories and Studies of Strange Things. By the way,
yeah,
I have downloaded the book. It is
they're
around
very short.
49 short stories.
Yeah, but
Yes.
they're very short. Like I was like, ये
Very
तो मैं भी
short, yeah.
पढ़ सकता हूँ. Like that type का short.
Like,
Uh,
that is the limit that we have at this point. कि stories का limit कितना होना चाहिए. If Dhruv can read it, मतलब it's palatable.
No, I have to have it on. I was looking at the online copies someone has. I was like, this is like nothing. I thought I'll read it before watching it, but I didn't eventually do
Hmm.
that. Anyways, the DOP of the film is Yoshio Miyajima. The set designer is Shigemasa Toda. The art direction, no, sorry, art direction is by Shigemasa Toda. Set design is by Dai Arakawa,
Hmm.
and costumes are by Masahiro Kato. And I'm saying this because this film is very heavy on those things,
This film is heavy on that, yes.
and it's quite magnificent in that respect also, and how it looks now also in terms of uh yeah, it's very, going back to expressionism in many ways, in a very terrific way. And I think it's a good mix of expressionist loud style and a good mix of very restrained style in many ways.
Hmm.
And music again is by Takemitsu, and I do want to talk about some of the sound in this film because I think some of it's really terrific.
Yeah.
The editing is by Hisashi Sagara, and this is not a conventional film, so we have four shorts essentially, which are four anthologies, and the film is actually divided in a way where you get an intermission after two, and then you get two other ones. The first and fourth story of Kwaidan are fairly short. They are like 20 minutes each, compared to the other films, which basically are more than an hour. Like I think one of them is 46 minutes, and the other one is 1 hour 20 almost. So in total, these are like 3 hours. This is a 3 hour, 2 minute long film, but you can very much, if you are one of those people, if you are like Varun, you can, break it up into 10 minutes bits and watch it and not lose much.
What Dhruv is trying to be very polite and I am not. If you're a Gen Z fucker who doesn't watch long movies, you can watch it in chunks. Though
Yes.
apparently Gen Zs like bigger movies in theaters, so what do we know?
Yeah, that's true. So I mean, who does? Anyway,
Hmm.
it's produced by Ninjin Club Production, which is not a name I have heard anywhere other than this in
Hmm.
when it associated with this film. And Toho, I think, distributed it,
Hmm.
and maybe produced a bunch of it also. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Uh, but the four segments essentially have their own names, own cast, adapted from different stories. The first and fourth one we can talk in brief, as they are very brief in the film.
Hmm.
Also, the first one is the black hair slash Kurokami, and the fourth one is
In a cup of tea.
in a cup of tea slash chawan no naka. Chawan, which
Hmm.
sounds like chai to some reason for me, but anyways.
I think that's the
Uh,
point. I think, yeah.
yeah, and then so yeah, Amartya told me before actually we were started this discussion that he didn't like the first one, so I want to know why did you not like it? Because I think it's really good.
No, I
Uh,
think I think all of these horror stories,
yeah,
basically all these short movies,
Hmm.
I think they have a problem with the resolution, basically
Sure,
because none of the resolutions are exactly of the visceral or of any sort of a kind which is
sure,
searching for closure. All
yes,
of these short films are mainly meditative nature of
yes,
Japanese folklore in a way.
yeah, and
So
they are
the
eerie, if that makes. I think eerie
they're
is a
eerie,
good
they're
way to.
very
Yeah,
atmospheric. They're
yes,
very,
yeah,
very atmospheric.
yeah.
So this one, the black hair, I did not like for a very simple reason. It is too ridiculous for my taste.
I
I
was
like
about to ask, yeah, was it that? So, and it's also, part of it also reminds me of a film. Well, it's not this ridiculous, but I think it reminds me a little bit of Kaneto Shindo's Kuroneko, because it's based on female apparitions, and
hmm.
it's
I
got this
need to
whole
see that. I had seen
really good.
Onibaba. Onibaba is fantastic, but I
I
need to
need
see
to see
that. Yeah.
that. So again,
Hmm.
but I mean, I think this. So I think what I was noting is I totally get the ridiculous point, and it is ridiculous,
It is
because it's
very
essentially a
ridiculous.
hair attacking a
Hmm.
person. So the reason
Essentially,
the
essentially what
plot,
happens
yes,
is there a swordsman in Kyoto basically divorces his wife, who is a
yeah,
weaver, and goes to another family,
noble
goes
woman
for a
who's
woman of a far
yeah,
more wealthier status.
yeah,
But he finds himself in a loveless marriage and is
yeah,
remembering his wife, so he basically asks for quote unquote a divorce,
yeah,
and
which he
then
doesn't get for a lot of years. It basically
yeah, he
ends
doesn't get
after.
her for a lot of
Yeah,
years. Yes.
So
Yeah.
no, so I totally get the ridiculous claim, and I was like, I don't know why I asked this question without actually realizing how ridiculous some of the bits in this are.
Hmm.
I just think it's I love the direction in this sequence, this segment,
I think the
particularly.
direction in all the four segments is sublime.
Yeah,
If I can
I
use
actually
that
think
word.
this might be his best directorial work out and out.
Oh yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think like even Harakiri, I think there's a lot riding on the writing also in that performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like here, I think the direction is
Like
really
Harakiri is very much like a complement of both the
yes,
writing as well as the direction.
yes,
I
yes.
think this is very much bolstered by the direction. The direction
Yeah,
is
yeah.
exquisite in this movie.
Yeah. I mean,
But
I thought so like even like because I'll just mention bits and pieces of the first one which I did really like. So it was just this high. But I mean, it's firstly again we've been talking about absolute dog crap for the past 3-4 weeks, right?
oh
What
yeah,
we've
yeah, yeah.
gotten in terms of
So हमारा
loudness.
मतलब expectation भी इतना low हो चुका है कि कुछ भी अच्छा लगेगा.
No,
Though
but
to
I
be
don't want
fair,
to. I
to
don't
be
want to
fair,
undermine. Yeah.
yeah, to be fair, considering what is coming in the future for QID, and I am mercifully out of that conversation. I am not going through the same pile of dog crap or that all these other guys are going
Yes. No, but I
through.
think I think it's very much. So there's one firstly the sound in this segment. I was just like, he like mutes it all in like even like general movements
It's
when
not
people are
even
walking or everything.
it's not even muting. Like he mutes it here. In the
Hmm.
second segment, the sound is like delayed.
Yes.
It's delayed, right?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Because I think to give the effect of a dream,
Yeah. Yeah.
when the sound is delayed.
Yeah.
In the third segment, the sound is much more lilting. It's more over
Hmm.
the top kind of.
Yeah.
So
It's
very
also because
weird.
it's two worlds colliding in the second one also. Like it's
Hmm.
not just one. But like in this, I was just like wondering. There are also these amazing cuts. There's this one thing where he has consistently dreams about his wife, and then it one of them cuts from her face to one of those swords hitting the wood ka
Yes.
block, and it's
Yes.
just like amazing on that. And then there's another similar cut from this our soldier, not soldier, samurai, essentially hitting the bow and arrow
Hmm.
and it hitting the target, and then cut to the wife, his second wife, basically yawning at being like, this is so essentially
This is
boring.
so
Like
essentially boring.
which
Yes.
I think is like just terrific in terms of condensing so much of information and like, the
Yeah,
using film
it's like
language in a
short
good
story.
way.
It's like how do you translate the conciseness of a short story into a movie? You
Yeah,
do it by editing. You do
yeah,
it by editing so rapidly,
yeah,
like
yeah,
conveying of information through
yeah,
faithfully and carefully placed cuts.
yeah, yeah. I
But
think
of course, let's go back to the ridiculousness. So this swordsman returns to his first wife and finds that his wife is still there weaving.
yeah,
Grasses have overgrown in front of the house, but his wife is still weaving. And
yeah,
he's like, "Oh my god, you haven't aged." And I'm like,
aged.
full on die. समझ में नहीं आता है
See,
उसको.
so
10
the
साल हो
reason.
चुका है. 10 साल हो चुका है. I can understand that pollution and water, you know, water
No,
wouldn't be so
I
polluted that time, but
understand.
come on.
I totally. I think the reason why I actually like the next part is because of the music again. Like again, it
Yes,
just
yes, yes.
goes into this totally somber
Not
one
even the
note.
music, it's like the camera work, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He
It's like,
suddenly angles
huh,
up the camera work, takes a
yeah,
Dutch angle,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
almost as if the entire house is shifting its
yeah.
dimensions. You
If
know?
that scene is done without soundtrack, though, I think I would be totally on your page. I would be like, I'm sorry, I can't. Like,
Hmm.
I'm sorry, I can't with the hair flying on his face,
Yes, yes, yes.
especially. But I was like, with the music, I was like, that mood was set of
Hmm.
it being super
But it's not over the
bad
top or
and chaotic.
loud.
Hmm.
Japanese soundtracks, most of them are like very, how do I put this? Uh it interrupts you, right? In very
Sure.
like a whistle sound, like
Yeah.
a single note. It's like a
Yes.
single rough,
Yes.
loud, callous type of note,
Yeah.
which interrupts the silence all the time.
Yeah.
It's not very, over the top, extremely jazzy, like some movies we can mention. But anyway,
Okay.
yes. The
Anyways, so and then we can briefly also talk about fourth one, which I think is I know the idea of the fourth one is going for incompleteness and fragmentation, but I do think it's just a bit like they ran out of budget and then they had to like, cobble together this fourth one just
It's
to,
also like a
put it
good
there.
way. It's also like a good way for a denouement. Like it's an epilogue. Like the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
story is itself is incomplete because
Yes.
the writer himself gets caught up in one of the story's
I
legend.
think that's a wonderful gag of him being caught up in Kwaidan's production.
Yes.
Like, I think it's a good meta gag if he is going for that,
Hmm.
because it did basically suck the life out of him.
Yes.
So it's kind of
Basically,
interesting
the
on that note.
fourth story follows in the Meiji restoration area, in the
Yes.
restoration time. I think this time around, like
Mhm.
this is after the Edo period. Okay, like the
Yes.
fourth story takes
The
place after
writer
the
is
Edo.
writing after the Edo
The
period. Yes.
writer is writing these stories,
Mm.
and suddenly he doesn't know how to finish this story.
Mm.
So he's very worried about it. When evening comes, his publisher comes to the house
Mm.
and searches for him basically, and suddenly finds something. What he finds is the legend which the writer had been writing, which is
Which
about,
we see.
yeah, which we
Uh,
see, which is basically about a cup of tea.
which I think is inherently a fairly creepy idea, because it's one of those things which, by chance, it's like, sometimes you look at a thing and you by chance see a reflection of something.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're just like, did I see that? Did I not see that? But of course, the film sort of builds on
The
it. But
film sort of builds on that dilemma
but
and
I
then
do
shows
find
that
the idea of it coming closer to you kind of creepy. Like,
it's very
first you see it
creepy.
in a wide shot,
Yeah,
like the reflection of a face
it's
you
very, very
see.
creepy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it keeps on coming closer to you. And I was like, that stuff is super creepy. I'm like,
That stuff
then,
is super
yeah,
creepy. And then,
yeah,
in the story, the main protagonist drinks that cup of tea in which he sees the reflection
the
of another
reflection,
man
and he throws it,
and he
then the
throws
cup.
it.
Yeah.
What we are led to believe is that was sort of a trap because the spirit is freed from that cup of tea,
Yes.
and he apparently, I don't exactly remember what he says, but he apparently says that, he says
He
thank
wants to
you.
invite him.
Yes, he
Like,
wants to
he's like,
invite him.
you hurt me. I want you to invite me to some. And then he sends his three retainers who are
Hmm.
also sort of reflections.
Hmm.
Again, it's very like, I feel,
Hmm.
I don't want to say it's flimsy, but I do feel it's like it takes too much of it
Yeah.
to a direction where I'm
So
just
yeah,
like,
so this guy basically sees that apparition, and because he's the faithful samurai, he attacks that apparition,
hmm,
and apparently hurts the ghost because he
yes,
hits the ghost. The
yes.
ghost escapes. The next
And
day, he's
he
visited,
escapes from the balls, which he tells the other people in the place.
and
And
the
they're
other people
like,
laugh at him because obviously.
yes, yeah.
The next day at night, he's visited by three assistants of the ghost, who tells him that the ghost had been hurt and is recuperating
He goes
in
to
a
a
hot
spa or
spring.
something. Hot
Yes, he's
spring,
on a
sorry,
spa or a
yes.
hot spring somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's
I'm like,
actually
oh,
quite like darkly
I'm like,
comic, this one.
okay, man. I was like, boy, weed used to be sold during that era also. Nice, nice.
Yeah, yeah, pretty basically, yeah. So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
the last one is very much it feels to me like Kobayashi got a knack of French New Wave and was like, let's do fragmentation and
Let's do
incompleteness.
fragmentation. Yes. Yes.
Which is fine. Like, again, it's a enjoyable, it's also harmless. It's like 23 minutes. So it's like,
Hmm.
not a, oh, and
Yeah.
the image of the tea May reflection is very creepy. I will
Yeah, so those
definitely admit.
three assistants, they come, and obviously the samurai doesn't believe them, and the samurai attacks the three of them. The story ends because the fight doesn't get any closure. That is why the story
Yes.
ends, because the
Yeah.
author doesn't know how to complete the story.
Yes.
The publisher sees that unfinished manuscript and doesn't know what to do when suddenly he finds
I
that
wish
the
they didn't show that image, huh? I
yeah,
wish they did, because I think the idea of them seeing something and we not knowing it, I think is quite creepy.
yeah.
Still.
The
But yes.
idea, the writer, the publisher sees that the writer apparently, while writing the story, gets caught in the legend himself and
You know,
is trapped in
I
that
can't
cup of
believe
tea.
I'm going to reference this movie. This reminds me of Dharna Manaya a little bit with the Aftab Shivdasani story. But okay.
Wow.
The
Wow.
ending does remind you of it. Otherwise, nothing. Okay. Also, Dharna Manaya is a very funny movie. So sorry. I know it's supposed to be a horror film, but it's genuinely one of the funnier Hindi
Hmm.
movies of the 2000s. But anyways, back to the ones which are like really, extensive, that sort of take your time. And I think the second one's actually quite sad. Like the
The
second
second one
one,
is sad. The second one is also the most gorgeous one of the
God,
lot.
yes, yes. And the third one is just like elaborate in the most ambitious way possible. And I think,
Hmm.
but it also has like some images which are very unforgettably violent and like, and it actually has some two comic sidekicks which I do actually really like.
Hmm.
The third one, sorry.
Hmm.
Anyways, the second one is The Woman of the Snow, which also called Yuki Onna.
Hmm.
Uh, this was basically the one story that was cut out when the film released in the
In the
States.
US.
Yeah, to shorten
Hmm.
the runtime of the
Hmm.
of Kwaidan when it released.
Hmm.
It's adapted from.
Remind me again who was the distributor in US?
I have no idea. I didn't.
Like if it is Weinstein, I won't be surprised.
अब 1964 में
Hmm.
I
यंग
doubt it.
बंदा तो था ही तब.
अच्छा तो
Hmm.
तभी से बेवकूफ था.
तभी से बेवकूफ वो आदमी बेवकूफ तो था नहीं वो आदमी कुछ और ही
Actually,
था. Yeah.
yes. So anyway, it's adapted from the story Yuki Onna only from Kwaidan.
Hmm.
And basically the focus, and I think it's quite in the opening with the blizzard is freaking insanely atmospheric just in its own, like just
The
the
opening
sound
with the
of the
blizzard
blizzard.
as well as the skies, because again it's
Yes.
like I told Dhruv in one of our
Hmm.
private chats, it feels like
Hmm.
a hybridization between actual movie making and no theater, because
Yeah.
there is artifice but the artifice feels
No
genuine.
theater is an ancient form of Japanese art,
Japanese
right?
play
Play
acting
acting,
theater,
yes.
yes.
There is this element, I don't know if we've mentioned in our Japanese episodes, but there are parts of Kwaidan in which there is this idea of benshis. Is it called benshis? People who used to uh, basically, they used to, I hate saying this, they used to be the explainers of Japanese cinema in the audience hall, essentially. Is it benshis? I think it's benshis. I'm not sure if that's not the term that they were
Greek
called.
term, I think they were the chorus guys basically.
Sure. Okay.
Hmm.
Anyway, there are times when the narrator sort of, does tell you what is also
If you
happening.
want
So,
if you want a present day example for this, I can't believe I'm bringing this movie up.
I mean, I made Darna Mana the connection. I don't think we can go worse. So,
Yeah. Listen to Arjun Valley. Look at the video of Arjun Valley
okay.
from Animal. Look at the video of Arjun Valley from Animal and see those Punjabans with the, with the
You have
pagris
gotten worse than
singing.
my comparison. Yes.
Yeah. Singing while
Okay.
the fighting is going on. That is
Okay.
basically the chorus of
Okay.
this. Yes.
Okay. Like moving on. The,
I'm
the
just
film.
saying, even idiot filmmakers use classical tropes. That's all.
Anyways, the plot is basically on two woodcutters, Monokichi and Musaku, I think, who are
Hmm.
caught in a blizzard. The latter of whom is killed by a Yoki Onna, which is a spirit, which is also called the Woman of the
No
Snow,
spirit.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, which is the English title also of the
Hmm.
short, and
It
she
reminds me of a
spares.
Robert E. Howard story. It reminds me of a Conan the Barbarian story, except this
Okay.
story is much more tragic. Conan the
Yeah.
Barbarian story is more violent.
Sure. So
But
in
yeah.
this, the Yoki Onna basically spares Minokichi's life because, and I know it sounds a bit daft, but because she likes him, because he's handsome, I think that's the reason. And fine, I know that Tatsuya Nakadai is handsome, and it's so weird to see him without beard. Like with beard, he looks like he's like 60, and without beard, he looks like he's like 18. So, which I think is.
I can say the same thing about Mifune also. Mifune in
Hmm.
Samurai Rebellion looks very weird without a beard.
Yes, yes,
Beard
yes,
or a
yes.
mustache.
Yeah,
He looks very weird.
yeah. So I think,
He
but
is a
yeah,
very handsome man, mind you.
yeah,
I'm not disparaging that
yeah.
attribute of his. I'm just saying he looks very weird.
No, but I think the initial sort of it does ask this story also asks you to take that leap where it's like she's just excusing him because she fancies him. I'm like, Okay, like that's a interesting,
Okay, interesting. Like
yeah.
spirits are also horny. Good to know.
y-
Good to know.
Which is fine, and then you sort of do when the story progresses, you get to know that she does actually fancy him, considering she takes a human form.
She takes a
Uh,
human form. She starts following him,
yeah,
and they
and
fall in
they have
love. They have
kids. They have
kids.
3 kids.
They have
But
three kids.
yeah, and so I think the first time I saw this, I remember being a bit I was just like, what is this? Like, I'm like, I
Hmm.
didn't buy it. But this time I'm watching, it's like it also feels very much a flip side of something like the shot before it, the black hair.
Hmm.
In that year, you have a spirit who basically defies the norms or the like her mythology of being this
Hmm.
cold
Yes.
killer, right? And she becomes very cliched, sort of more
Mm,
human than
yeah,
human.
but ultimately strapped by the mythology of her own,
Yeah,
by
but
her
she
own
again spares
mythology.
him. She finds reasons to spare him still. Like, I feel
Hmm.
it's like her love is
Hmm.
so like devotional in one sense. Like, I
Hmm.
know she mentions two different reasons. First, he's handsome.
Hmm.
The second one is more legitimate. The second one is like,
I mean, we can't disparage that people get attracted for reasons
no,
much
no,
less.
I get it, but like I'm just like, it just feels a bit at that moment because it's such a
Ancillary,
serious moment.
ancillary,
No.
yes.
Yeah, because I'm just like, well, you just killed a man. Like, I'm like, okay.
Yeah, man, she's a spirit. Why do What do you think? Why do you think she cares? She doesn't
I
care.
know, I know. Anyways, the sort of
The
denouement in
entire
which
point
is
of the
very
story
much,
is this guy in marital bliss while talking with his wife
yes.
tells her that she reminds him because she resembles the snow spirit.
Yeah, and the only thing that the snow spirit said is that you can't mention
You
this
can't
incident.
mention me or the events that had
Yeah,
transpired, but
yeah,
he breaks the rule
yeah.
by telling her only. And I'm like,
Yes,
wait, that should be the loophole anyway. What are you doing?
yeah. No, but I think it's just this. Yeah, but I think that's, weirdly enough, now that you've said it, it's very romantic in that sense.
Yes.
That
Mm,
he breaks the rule to her, but she's
mm,
sort of conformed by it and then sacrifices still herself
mm,
to go rather than, take his life. I
mm.
like how she defies the rules. And then the last image of the film is so moving, I think. Like
It's
that
very
he's
moving, yes.
he's made these sandals for her and her
For
kids,
their family, basically,
yeah,
for
for
their
their
family.
family. And then she leaves into the snow as she left in the first sequence barefoot.
Mm,
And then he leaves the sort of sandals outside. And then she goes in, but they sort of vanish,
mm.
almost seeing like she's sort of accepted them and she's leaving. Anyways, but we
What
also have
is
to talk about just
really
the
the big,
filmmaking here.
really the
Yeah.
big positive for this shot is the cinematography, which is
Yeah.
absolutely gorgeous, especially the
The
color.
use of blue color in this
Mm.
firstly, and
Yeah.
then that return, sort of the blizzard color of like
Mm.
this pale blue, or like you
Mm.
get this, and then there's the blissful period where it becomes like a proper
Mm.
background is like, do you remember the wood cutting scene when it's like a
Yes, yes,
totally
yes.
red orange background, and
Mm.
then when the two meet, it's also similarly like that. I mean, it's just
It reminds you of
gorgeous.
an Aditya Chopra movie.
Good, good. I mean, not good, but whatever. I don't know what to say. See, we've mentioned too many movies which I didn't think we would. I have, and so has Amartya. The animal thing was a big jump scare. Remaining with the
Works in
horror.
horror, so
Yeah,
chalega.
I know. But anyways, yeah, I think this is on the second watch definitely one of the loveliest of the
Yes.
four. And then we can just briefly talk about Hoichi the Earless, which is definitely, I think, the most popular, I want to say,
The most
of,
popular, the poster is basically of that guy
of
anyway,
the
Hoichi the
face.
Fearless,
Yes, yes.
yes.
It's
Of
called
the face.
Miminashi Hoichi na
Hmm.
Hanashi.
Hmm.
I'm sorry for butchering the name. But it also incorporates aspects of the tale of Heike, which is basically the
Yeah, the
first
story
10
which
minutes or
Hoichi is
15 minutes
singing.
of the film. Yeah.
Yeah, the story which Hoichi is singing, yes.
Yeah. And it's basically the 10-15 minutes of the film in which I thought the first time when I saw it that something went wrong with the print I was watching. Because I was like,
Why? Why?
I don't know. It was because it breaks into like these really performative theater
Hmm.
modes, and then you also have a lot of still images, right, of the myth, the
Hmm.
legend, in which I was like, is this correct? Because I was expecting the face with the tattoos, essentially, which happens towards the
Towards the
not
latter
tattoos,
half, the end
not the
of the film.
tattoos, but like whatever the ink paint.
Hmm.
Uh, that's on the face. But anyways, I think now it's become like a very classic story of, imposing past onto present in a very sort
Hmm.
of normal way. But I think this does it quite literally at times. And I think
Hmm.
it's quite
So
gorgeous
the
in the way it goes
singer,
through it.
yeah. So the
Hmm.
young blind musician playing the biwa, okay,
Yes.
which is the instrument. His
Yeah.
specialty is singing the tale of the Heike, which is the
Yeah.
chant. The tale of the Heike is also folklore about the story of, if I'm not mistaken, the Ginpei War. The Ginpei
Genpei
War
War,
is
which I think is after which the shogunate came into power.
no, Shogunate came much later. The
Much
Ginpei
later.
War
Okay,
is
fine.
way, way,
Before
way
that.
before.
Way
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
before that. Okay.
It's during
Yeah. But
1100s or
it
something.
but it's about how the loss of the Haikais essentially, how
Yeah,
they
the
lost the
clans.
war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
So
how
that is very
basically
theatrical, right? Because there is
very
smoke and everything.
yes.
There's like, miniature ships and everything. There's like
Yes.
production of ships and fighting
Yeah.
and all. It would remind you of the TV shows we had grown up watching of our favorite epics, all
Mhm.
the weird stuff, all the play acting and all the artificiality of it all
Mhm.
works very well because like Kobayashi intentionally amplifies that artificiality.
Yeah. And but it's also like superimposed upon like real,
Real, yeah, yeah.
the waves, which I think it's just the whole thing of because a lot of them drown themselves within these
Hmm.
waters.
Hmm. Hmm.
Again, what we talk about Harakiri in some senses, you get
Hmm.
even this happening in a different sort of sense to avoid
Hmm.
defeat. They sort of submerge themselves, and then you get like this image of them sort of existing within the present through spirits or through some other form.
Hmm.
Strange incidents keep on happening in this place, which has now become a monastery, or has it become like it's like we talked about Buddhism sort of coming into the foray here. There's a temple built, and then there's priests essentially in that temple
Hmm.
who, and then Hoichi is one of the students, the blind students who's uh, attending there or maybe staying there, who plays the beaver, of course.
Yes, and the
Uh,
thing about it is ki Hoichi is such a wonderful Piva singer
yeah.
that one night a samurai leads
Mm,
Hoichi to a mysterious ancient court.
yes.
Okay, Hoichoi is led there every night to this mysterious court. He returns home extremely exhausted, very pale,
Mm,
like a ghost.
mm.
Okay, and then two sidekicks of that temple follow him, and then they finally discover.
No, but I think it's interesting to think, and that's because this time I was watching, it links very well with a lot of the authoritarian critique, I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah,
you want
yeah.
to go with. They're told to survey, basically look at this person,
Hmm.
and they follow them on the order of the head priest who
Yeah,
sends them, right?
and they find out that Hoichi is being led to the
Graveyards.
ghosts of
Mm,
graveyards of these
mm.
clans who had
Yes.
died during the Ginpei War,
Yeah.
and these clans had risen up from the dead, and they are
Yes.
listening to the story
Yeah.
and reenacting them.
Yes. Yeah, I
Reenact.
feel it almost feels like they are using his art, the
Hmm.
Biwa playing essentially, and the
To
narration.
become to reanimate themselves somewhat.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. I thought it was more to exercise almost. Like, it's like exercise the pain of sort of the war
Hmm.
and all that. Reanimate them.
I don't
Okay.
think it would be exorcising per se, because if it was
Okay.
exorcising, then one time would have been enough. I think
Okay.
by listening to the song, they are almost vicariously living their
Sure.
moments of that
Their
time through
tale.
that
Okay.
song, and almost
Interesting.
reanimating them.
Okay.
It's the definition of insanity somewhat, na? Like repeating the same thing and over, hoping for a different result. It's like
Sure.
reanimating
Sure.
themselves and reenacting the moments of trauma
Hmm.
just so they can, walk away from the moment of trauma, except
Sure.
that they
So
can't.
so after that, you'd think that. So my thing was that what was interesting to me is that after they take back Hoichi to like the priests take back Hoichi to the temple, they are
Hmm.
basically saying that you have to believe us in this idea that the spirit will harm you regardless. The
Hmm.
spirit of the Heike and whatever
Hmm.
whoever has been taking you, the samurai, they will harm you regardless. So we will paint uh your whole body in what is the thing they paint him in?
The
What's
Heart Sutra.
the Heart Sutra? But of course, because they are priests, they
And they
forget
are
to
authoritarian buffoons who
they f-
don't know anything perfectly to finish their job. They had forgotten to write the text on the ears. So when
yes.
the samurai
Do
enters
you
that.
think the samurai comes to kill him? I thought he just came to take him again to their
No, I think
place.
the samurai came to take him. I think,
Okay, just
I
for another
think,
performance, sort of like
mm,
that.
yeah, I
Hmm.
think if he didn't, if he hadn't said this,
Hmm.
Hochi hadn't, revealed that intent. I think if Hochi hadn't been caught,
Hmm.
singing to the spirits,
Hmm.
I think he would have continued doing this, and the spirits would have continued calling him, and this would have gone on for a while
Hmm. Without harming him.
without harming him. Though I
Hmm.
think his health was deteriorating
Health was
anyway, so it was
deteriorated. Hmm.
automatically harming him anyway.
Sure. Sure.
So the
Hmm.
problem here is that the priest thinks that it's like a vast illusion,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
that if obeys them again, they would tear him to pieces. Again,
Hmm.
narrative. Again, this is the common
Narrative.
thread
Yes.
here, right?
Hmm.
Narrative.
Hmm.
Myths are also
Hmm.
parts. Myths are also a form of narratives anyway.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So concern for his safety, they draw the entire heart sutra over his entire body, except they
Hmm.
forgot to write it in his ears.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what happens is the samurai enters that house. Because of the heart sutra, he can't see Hochi. He can only see two levitating ears.
Which is quite again, rather than
Quite
it
a
can be a funny image, but I think it was fairly like that sequence is tense.
The
So I
visual
think,
effects is fantastic in this,
yeah,
by the
yeah,
way,
yeah,
for the era that it had come out. Mind
yeah,
you, 2001: A Space Odyssey hadn't come out yet,
yeah,
so for the era that it had been released, that's a pretty impressive visual effect.
yeah,
But also the fact that the samurai also says, "Yes, 2 years. I will take
yes.
these
Take
years to
the
the Lord to prove that
to
he's not there." I'm like, wait, hold on, hold on for a
I
second.
but that image of the ears bleeding is genuinely like,
Yeah.
disturbing, I think. So I think you
Mm,
get
mm.
yeah, but I think I again really like the conclusion of this also. Like it's this whole idea of him
Mm.
then becoming popular because other clans are inviting him and the priests are like, we don't know if this is real or truth. And then they
Yes.
start to receive gifts from people and like storing them up in their temple. And again, I think that idea of it, of Harakiri ka narrative, that whole idea of making narratives and believing in things that perhaps are more than what you believe in them, I think is the
Mm-hmm.
big thing that comes into it. And again, it sort of becomes another authoritarian critique in a lighter way, in a more indirect way, but it does, I think.
Indirect, more
Hmm.
folklorish way
But
somewhat. Yes.
this is also very much a championing of the art form. I think of
Hmm.
the theater, as you said, even Biwa playing. I
Yeah,
think Biwa is.
because by the end, Hochi's ears are gone,
Hmm.
but even when he's so gruesomely, you know, hurt,
Hmm.
broken somewhat,
Hmm.
he
Hmm.
still wants to continue playing the biwa so that he
Yeah.
could console the sorrowful spirits. And
Yes.
because he does that for so long, and because of
Hmm.
the legend of the man Hochi the Earless,
Hmm.
he becomes famous, he becomes
Hmm.
wealthier.
Yeah. But you don't know if the credits of that he takes or like
Hmm.
the temple takes, which is the other sort of, like again, very interesting stuff going on
The story
even
finishes
along
by
with
saying that Hochi becomes a wealthy person, but
wealthy
again,
man. Yes.
narrative.
But no,
Again,
but they
narrative.
show us
Hmm.
the idea that the temple is, taking all these gifts and
Hmm.
storing them in there. I was like, very interesting to see it after something like Harakiri and before whatever
Hmm.
Rebellion, and I think how it fits into it. So yeah, I think that's we've talked hopefully a lot about Masaki
Hmm.
Kobayashi and the Edo period and the samurais and the shogunates and
Yeah. If I
the
have
violence.
traumatized anybody who had been listening from the
Harakiri.
beginning, yeah, during Harakiri, I'm sorry, but I actually felt that that part needed to be
Absolutely.
expounded upon,
No, no, this is
because
going
the
as
movie,
explicit, so it's fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
the movie also takes a very long amount of time to
Yeah.
explain what is Harakiri, what is
Hmm.
happening.
Yeah.
There is a reason why the movie won at Cannes,
Hmm.
you know, there
Yeah, I
is a
mean,
reason why.
yeah, I think it's quite. I think I hope we have done whatever little justice we can to these films.
Hmm.
We
I always go with the thought that we aren't doing any sort of justice. We are trying our best we can at this point, because
no,
it's
no,
too
that
much
only. Like
contextual.
I mean
Yeah.
that only, rather than doing. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, we are. I hope we did our best. We did prepare for this, so I hope it
Somewhat,
came through.
yes.
Yeah.
It's too
So,
much context. Again, like I
hmm,
was telling Dhruv beforehand, it's
hmm,
too much context. It's like a huge rabbit hole. And
yeah,
we didn't even talk about like Shogun, which is again
hmm,
dealing with
yeah,
the Tokugawa shogunate, the formation
yeah,
of the Tokugawa shogunate.
yeah.
You know?
When we talk about Shogun, we will talk about it, hopefully.
Yes.
But I need to sit and watch it, which I do want to, so I will.
Hmm.
But yes, thank you for whoever has stuck around and listened to it. I know I'm not going to edit much because a lot of it has been very valuable. Listening, learning, and even talking about some of the details about these films, about Kobayashi, about this period in Japanese cinema history. But again, very short period of time. There is nothing we are again reiterating. We are talking about which covers an iota of, even a filmmaker. I feel it's very hard to talk about a filmmaker only in one episode. We have talked about three films. He's made about 10, 15 more. Maybe someday we will do a Human Condition trilogy episode, though I will not be rewatching that trilogy
Hmm.
again very time soon because I am not getting traumatized. So
Like Japanese movie, when we had started this deep dive with the first Japanese movie episode,
101, right? Mm.
yeah, we had begun by stating that we are not going to go through it all because it's impossible.
We can't go through an era without having a
We,
Japanese podcast, like an exclusive
yes,
Japanese podcast.
exclusive Japanese movie
Yeah.
podcast. It's impossible.
Yeah, I
The
mean the
amount.
variety, the breadth of stuff that's on
Mm.
display, even. And I mean, I'm glad only that's more and more and more for us to dig into and like again,
I mean, the entire intent of this podcast is not just because both of us are play acting like teachers trying to teach our audiences about stuff. We
yeah,
are watching, we are learning as well. So
yeah,
basically, we are also sharing what we are learning and sharing
yeah,
our passion. Hopefully, that shines
yeah,
through.
yeah. Hopefully, uh,
Amidst the trauma and the jokes,
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's the intention.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, please let us know if there are similar topics you want us to talk about. Again, preparation time might take its
Hmm.
own time or whatever, but like we would love to do more deep dives, which I think make us learn more, especially. And you can follow us on Spotify at Queen is Dead Film Podcast or Queen is Dead Podcast. Instagram account I'm not going to say anything about because it's barely active. But you can follow Amartya at Amartya25. You can follow me at Amartya. At you can see how flustered I think we are. We've talked so much about these films at Terminal Cinema. If you want to. And yes, Khatam. Thank you. Thank you. Where is the stop button?